If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
If you've ever seen a supernatural being, ghost, or demon, what was your most terrifying and craziest paranormal encounter?
My story goes back to when I was about 5 to 6 years old. I was asleep one night when I awoke in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I remember quite vividly how I got out of bed and headed to go to the bathroom. My room has a guest room adjacent to my own, with the bathroom being to the left of the adjacent guest room. I was at my room's door when I saw what looked like my grandmother, who died before I was born. I literally stumbled and fell on my butt before trying to fumble for the light switch, all while never taking my eyes off of her /it. It was coming towards me from inside the guest room. I even remember trying to reach for the TV to turn it on for any kind of light. My body wouldn't do what I wanted for the life of me. Which then resulted in me feeling paralyzed. That's when it had reached me and started reaching for me. It took my arm, and all I felt was what I can describe now as dread in that moment. I asked her it what she wanted from me, and she replied by saying my blood. Which didn't make any sense at the time. Thankfully, I was smart enough to try offering the cross that I had worn around my neck since I was a baby instead. The second I offered it to her, it seemed to have broken whatever hold or trance she had me in. Because the next thing I know, I'm literally sitting in my doorway in the dark, holding my cross in my hand by myself, and I was finally able to move and turn on the light. Years later, I finally had the nerve to tell an ex this story, and they kind of looked at me with a pale but serious face and said that wasn't my grandma at all. I still keep that cross to this day. I was hiking on a trail in Appalachia with 2 friends. I won't reveal the location. The larger, older trees along this section are all twisted from vortex energy. There is an unspoken feeling that suggests we should not step off the path. It's always eerily quiet there. As my friends and I reached the crest of the trail, we felt we should turn back. An unspoken energy conveyed this to us all. It was a firm nod to us that we were no longer supposed to be there. I was in the lead, and as I turned to suggest we leave, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was slightly ahead of me on the trail. A figure dressed in a somewhat cartoonish witch outfit was floating about 10 feet above the trail, slightly ahead of me. I was told telepathically not to use this place as entertainment. We mindfully walked back to the car and breathed a bit easier. Something is outside. I am living with my grandmother, who was recently widowed a few years ago. She and my grandfather had a house made in the outskirts of the city way back. To give you somewhat of an idea, they live 2 hours away from town. You might be wondering why we didn't consider having her move in with us. The reason is that she adheres to traditional values and is adamant about dying in her home, just like my grandfather. The house and property aren't too bad, it's quite pretty during the day. The problem comes when nighttime rolls around. As you can imagine, there's no light pollution, so it's pitch black outside, with the only source of light being a utility pole they had installed and the motion sensor lights by the living room. On this night, my grandma turned them off before going to bed. I myself, being a 20M in college, decided to catch up on some assignments since I couldn't sleep. While doing my work in the living room, I heard the unmistakable sound of something scratching and putting its weight against the screen door. It sounded like branches scraping against metal. The only thing is, we don't have any trees or bushes by the front door. Immediately my heart skipped a beat, and everything went silent. All I could hear was the sound from that thing at the door. This lasted for roughly around 20 to 30 seconds. I was too afraid to look up from my screen. The whole time I could feel something watching me as it was hidden by the darkness. Eventually the noise stopped, but this didn't mean I was safe. After the noise stopped, I sat still on my couch until it felt safe for me to get up and lock myself in my room. From there I texted my parents explaining what just happened. Ghost/spirit/creature? What the heck did I see that night? This happened to me just outside Vancouver, BC, about 15 years ago. I was out eating dinner with my father and his friend. After dinner we decided to go to my father's house. We had 2 cars there at the restaurant, so my father took his car, and I was the passenger in my father's friend's car. I was fine when we left, and about halfway home I suddenly felt dreadfully ill. We pulled over, I puked, and like it never happened, I was fine again. The feeling came on suddenly and strong and left just as quickly. Strange. We continue back and reach my father's house, and my father had a very steep driveway, as his property was a slope/mountainside property. As we pull up the driveway, my father's friend slams on the brakes, and we both see what looks like a woman. Can't see a face, very long hair like down to the knees all around, white dress with frills, no feet, just floating above the ground from right to left. It seemed solid enough because the car's lights highlighted whatever it was. It went by fairly quickly. We were both spooked. We continued pulling up the driveway, got out, and ran inside. Then my father's friend ends up in the washroom puking 10 minutes later. I still think about that incident to this day, and it obviously creeps me out. I'm wondering WTF it was. Has anybody heard of anything like this before? A time ago, between the beginning of October and the end of November, every night I woke up between 3 and 5 in the morning. Every time I left my room, I felt a gaze so strong that it made me look directly outside my door that leads to my patio. I never saw anything until November 1st, when I saw a white cat completely focused in front of my door, looking directly at my room. Without knowing what to do, I just opened the door, trying to get it to leave. I thought they were looking for food, so I offered them some. During that entire time, the cat didn't move at all. I wanted to look directly into his eyes, and as I carefully observed him, I noticed that the cat had no pupils. That thing was really scary. His face looked like a goblin's face or something like that, and he had a very heavy look. I wanted to touch him, but my fingers barely touched his fur, and my hand automatically took off. I felt an immense chill. I quickly entered my house, closed the door, and hid in my room. My parents told me that they too had seen the cat. They had even tried to pour water on it, but it never moved. We had to put a curtain from the ceiling to the floor because we were afraid to go out and see it and feel its gaze. After November 5th, the cat just disappeared, and we never heard from it again, luckily. There is a gravestone in a village near where I live. It's basically an angel looking at their feet with two fingers pointing to the air. When I was young, my dad, who grew up in the area, used to tell me stories that for years the local kids were scared of the statue and that if you got too close, it would grab you and use the fingers to draw blood from your neck. When I was a teenager, my group of friends and I used to all hang out in this village, as that's where the majority of people in the group lived. There were way too many of us to go to someone's house, so we would roam the streets, not causing any trouble. We weren't bad kids. One night we were hanging around as usual but happened to be near the graveyard with the angel statue in it. I remembered the stories my dad used to tell me about the statue and told my friends. We all decided it would be great fun to go down and have a look at the statue, as one of them had a torch, US translation, flashlight. When we reached the statue, the girl who was holding the torch shone it up in the angel's face. Its expression was one of a kind of soft sadness as it stared directly down at its feet. The girl then shone the torch at the inscription below so we could read who was buried there, then she shone the light back up to the statue's face. This is where the story gets wild, and I can remember it as clear as day. The position of the head had gone from staring down and directly ahead to looking at the girl who was standing to the left. It also had an expression of pure rage. Literally about 15 of us clocked it, screamed, and ran for our lives. I guess this could be an isolated case of mass hysteria and bored kids with active imaginations, but it's the only supernatural thing that I can say that's happened to me. The village does reportedly have a few ghosts and a very long history. I never felt alone in my room growing up. Especially when I was the only one home. My bed was backwards. Feet against the wall, head out in the open. I had this weird sensation of doom. I kept my feet at the wall and curled up. Putting my head about 3 feet from the top of the bed. I felt some things touching my head. I scrunched down further, and my pillow went violently off the bed, at the head of the bed. I saw, several times, out of the corner of my eye, something dancing. I got angry and confronted my room. Nothing makes a boy feel braver than a Rambo knife. And I had 2 of them. My window was covered with a pull-down blind. The kind you have to pull down for it to go up. I kept it closed all the time because my window was into our front yard. I stood in the middle of my room and loudly proclaimed, "I don't believe in you. If you are real and really here, open the blind." The thing that had been dancing at the side of my vision came forward and opened the blind. Letting go of it and letting it fly up to the top. I threw one knife at it, and it ran to the other side of me. I threw the second knife to my side, towards it, as I ran out of the room. I got home from school and found both knives on my bed in an X pattern. I was the last to leave and the first to be home. When I was 4-ish, my cousin lived out in the country. He lived in a house that used to be an old schoolhouse. There were 3 levels, and on the 3rd level a teacher had hung himself. I don't know if my aunt and uncle found that out before or after they moved there. Anyway, I was in my cousin's bedroom, he was 6, and looking out the window. My cousin had just walked out to do something. I was staring out the window and saw him at the edge of the cornfield next door, maybe 40 feet from his house. I didn't think to myself, there's no way my cousin made it that far in 15 seconds, I was young. I saw my cousin waving for me to come. I can still see his striped shirt and curly hair in the edge of the cornfield. I was looking, and I don't recall if I said anything, but he yelled, "Jump, come on, just jump." And being little, I thought it was reasonable. I had pulled a chair to the window and had just put the screen up. It was the 70s, and windows didn't have the safety features they do now, lol. Anyway, I was on the chair looking at my cousin and said, "It's too far down," and he said, "It's okay, I do it all the time." I literally had one leg out the window when my actual cousin came back into the room. It turns out he had just gone to the washroom, not the cornfield, and started screaming at me. He yelled, "What are you doing?" I was terrified because I looked back at the cornfield, and there was no one there. I tried to argue. He was at the cornfield and told me to jump. He went and got his mom, my aunt, and said I was trying to jump out the window. I was horrified. I don't recall my aunt being mad, though. She didn't say much, but I remember her asking me intently what I saw. My cousin was mad and kept saying I did not go to the cornfield. My aunt never verified that she believed me but didn't make me feel weird. She just asked things like, was it his actual voice? Etc. I have no recollection past this. I don't know if she told my mom, etc. At that age I had no idea about anything paranormal or supernatural. Turns out when I was 10, I started having visions and ended up being a medium. I now think that was my first encounter with a spirit. Too bad it was a terrible one that wanted to watch me jump to my death. I have had many, but this one takes the cake and helped me find religion. My cousin, friend, and I were around 18 to 19 and thrill seekers. We would drive to haunted locations and get out of our cars and sit in haunted tunnels, the whole 9 yards. One night we decided to drive over the mountain to a haunted bridge in Lexington, Virginia. We sat there, and it was spooky, but nothing happened. We decided to return back home. After we got down our side of the mountain, my cousin asked if we should go to the lake, a beautiful state park with a view of the mountains, and take the backroads way home. We all agreed. We parked in front of the lake in a parking lot/landing zone area overlooking the lake with the mountains in the backdrop behind it. This was around 1 a.m. I noticed a green, basketball-sized orb deep in the water, illuminating the water around it with a greenish hue. I looked over to my cousin and friend, who were both fixated on it, then looked back. When I looked back, this orb-like object transfigured itself above water into a bird-like/pseudo-angelic being. I can't remember too much about the face, but it was a winged semi-transparent being. It flapped its wings 2 to 3 times in front of us and then pulled a straight-up Star Wars hyperdrive moment, like when the stars turn into lines, and teleported straight up into the sky/space in front of our eyes. This being had a kind of authoritarian presence to it. We didn't feel threatened by it, but we were absolutely shook. We drove home silent/in shock. The main thing I have a hard time with is the predestination aspect of this. Why did we decide to go down a random back road at 1 a.m. to sit in a parking lot by a lake instead of just going home? The second thing is that I am a logic-driven person, my family is Ivy League educated, and I have a master's in cloud computing. My brain still has a hard time understanding something that there is no human word for to describe. This was very akin to a road to Damascus moment and broke down any sense of understanding/logic that I believed in to the core. If someone told me they had physical relations with Bigfoot, I could honestly believe them, because what I saw was crazier than that, and this bothers me deeply. I take solace, however, in the understanding that we as humans will never know or understand everything, and not everything is explainable with our faculties. This event helped me on my path to finding religion, and maybe that was the purpose after all. I think an entity/spirit followed me home, and I don't know what to do. 2 days ago my car broke down in this huge remote church parking lot, something about the engine being too hot, and I had to stop immediately. When my mom tried to start the car back up after turning it off, it just wouldn't start. She called my dad, and while we were waiting on him to come down and see what was wrong, I got out of the car to stretch my legs. Around this point was when I started to really notice the deep woods that surrounded one side of the parking lot. It was dark out, around 7 o'clock, I think, and I sent a picture of the area to my best friend because it just looked really eerie and unsettling, almost like something out of the back rooms. In the picture, there was this glowing white thing that only showed up when I pointed my phone at it. Before you think that there was something wrong with my camera, I tried it on many other points in the woods, and it never showed up. There also weren't any streetlights around the area where we broke down because it was a small back road, so it couldn't have been the glare off of something like that. I got home, and an uncomfortable feeling washed over me as soon as I got to my room. I went to bed a little while later, and everything seemed fine. The next morning was when things started to set into place. There was a knocking sound on my windows, and it would move around in between them and above them. And at first I just disregarded it as birds, but when I went outside there was nothing there. I don't believe any animal that is usually around my area could reach where my windows are as well, for they are pretty high up off the ground. It sounded like someone knocking on a door. 3 knocks, and then it would turn rapid, pause for a second, and then start over again. This would go on for long periods at a time and then randomly stop completely. That evening, things started to get knocked off my vanity and my desk. They were objects that weren't at all close to the edge or near my fan or my air vent. I was really scared, so I called my best friend that I had sent the picture to, which calmed me down but didn't stop the paranoia I had of something possibly attacking me when I went to sleep. I stayed up but dozed off a couple times. One of the times, the last time, I fell asleep for what couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. I don't know if I was dreaming or what, but I heard this almost screech that I can honestly only describe as pure evil and sinister. It sounded like something of the devil. Today I started feeling things touching me, from the time I went to school all the way to when I got home, and it's still happening. Just a few minutes ago I was walking out of my bathroom, and I felt something like a cold hand touch my shoulder from behind. I thought it might be my dad, so I turned around and said, "Hey," but there wasn't anything there. I let out a small scream, turned back around to head to my room, and saw a shadow heading towards my mom's room, who was asleep. It couldn't have been my dad because his room was right behind where I was standing in the hallway, so I would have noticed if he had passed me. I don't know how much help I can get with this, but please put out any ideas you may have. I'm scared for myself, my family, friends, and my house. In 2020, during a period of reduced security due to COVID, my friends and I visited an abandoned prison in Georgia. When we first entered on the south side, we heard what sounded like a saw, but there was nobody there and no electricity since 2008. We immediately ran out because we were genuinely extremely startled by the sound and how extremely loud it was. We gathered ourselves and decided to try our luck on the north side. When we got into the building, we walked around the first floor for a bit and heard some stuff falling off the walls, most likely paint chips, but nothing crazy. My friend suggested that we go up a floor since nothing was really happening on the first floor. I got an awful feeling that something was off and that we should check the basement level first, because if there was someone down there, they would be able to completely block our only accessible exit. Mind you, we hadn't heard any voices or seen any lights or signs that anyone else was in the building. We were also very quiet and checked as we went. The entryway to the basement could only accommodate 2 people at a time, and since one of my friends and I had previously been there were 4 of us in total. We took the lead. He aimed his flashlight light to the left. We saw all the way down to the end of the tunnel. When we aimed the flashlight to the right, unfortunately the side I was on, I was met with a man's chest about a ducking inch from my face. In a split second, I looked up, and as I looked up, he had the most empty, barren expression I'd ever seen before. Within the same second, I quickly turned around to get up the stairs. As I tried to reach my hand out to get a grip and use the wall to turn around faster, my hand slipped and went straight ducking through where he was standing. There was nothing there. I ran faster than I have ever run in my entire life and had a ducking asthma attack halfway through the terrifying, dark, decrepit abandoned prison. My most terrifying experience. Years ago, my ex-wife and I were visiting her grandmother for the 4th of July in an old mining town in Montana. For setting, her grandmother lived in the home she was born in, built in the late 1800s and early 1900s. An old brick and stone house cluttered with era-appropriate furniture, paintings, and decor. Very old, very eerie. After a day of BB-ching, sightseeing, and lighting off fireworks, I and my ex-wife head to bed. The room we were staying in was located off the kitchen and consisted of 2 small bedrooms connected by a hallway, with a single door leading back to the kitchen. My ex falls asleep immediately, and I lay there a while before hearing her grandmother come in and take the bedroom attached to ours. She gave up her own bedroom to my ex's parents, who were also staying. I hear the creaks of old bed springs as she adjusts to lie down when all of a sudden she starts mumbling, progressively getting louder, clearer, and more violent. She starts cursing and saying something to the effect of "Leave me the duck alone, my family is here," and a whole lot of duck yous. By this point I am in complete shock, as I've known her for years at this point and had never heard a curse word come from her mouth. She starts to say no 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 no, and from the corner of her room, across the hallway, a straight shot from where I'm lying, I hear very labored/gasping breathing. Like someone is halfway breathing underwater or through a machine. The breathing intensifies, becoming deafening and persisting for an indeterminate duration. My eyes are pinned shut, and I feel the most dread and discomfort I've ever felt in my life. Truly the worst feeling I've ever experienced. Even with my eyes shut, I feel as if the room is growing darker and darker from that corner as the breathing continues. And just like that, it stops. Her grandmother shifts out of bed and goes to sleep on the couch. As she's leaving, I manage to muster just enough courage to open my eyes, and from the light of the kitchen, I see her leaving, and right behind her is an enormous dog. It had to be 4 or 5 feet tall at the shoulders. She had a black lab, but it never came in with her, it wasn't in there when I lay down, and what I saw had to be double the size. I've experienced a lot of paranormal activity in my life, but that day terrifies me. Haunted farmhouse in the Catskills. My parents were looking for a vacation home. They could have purchased a house on the water in the Hamptons, but instead, they chose not to. They bought a haunted, and I mean haunted, 18th century farmhouse in upstate NY. The house on 100 acres had 7 bedrooms, a tenant house that was divided into 2 parts to separate male and female servants, and various other outbuildings. There was a little one-room schoolhouse with a cupola containing a big bell and an enormous barn with mahogany horse stalls and an antique weather vane. We were told that battles during the French and Indian War had been fought on the land. At one time it had served as a stagecoach inn. This house had the most oppressive atmosphere you can imagine. You constantly felt like you were being watched, and it was an intense feeling, almost unbearable at times. I remember sitting in the den watching television on a beautiful summer day. I was the only one at home. My mom and siblings had gone into town to do some shopping. I was watching I Love Lucy on one of the only 4 channels available on the television there lol, and that oppressive feeling of being watched overwhelmed me. I left the house and started walking towards town because I was so creeped out. I found out years later that my brother had had the same experience and done the same thing. The first thing that happened to me, which I couldn't explain, took place in my bedroom, which had 2 twin beds. My mother and I were the only 2 at the house that weekend, and she had been sleeping in the other bed. I was woken up at about dawn by the sound of sheets rustling on the other bed. It was loud and continuous, so I rolled over and looked. There was no one in the bed. I thought perhaps my mom was making my brother's bed in his bedroom, which had an adjoining wall with mine. Nope, she was in the kitchen at the opposite end of the house. You have to understand that this was an enormous house. The kitchen was on the 1st floor, and my bedroom was on the 2nd floor. You could have set a bomb off in the kitchen, and I wouldn't have heard it in my bedroom. On another occasion my mother, who didn't believe in ghosts, was staying at the house by herself. She was again sleeping in my bedroom. She told me that in the middle of the night something sat down on the corner of her bed, depressing the mattress. She said she saw the mattress pushed down, but there was no one there. We own this home for many years, and so many things happen that this is going to have to be a thread. There was also a haunted restaurant in town called the Bull's Head Inn. We rarely ate there, expensive, and I never experienced anything there, but the story is the bar occupied the space that had previously been the bedroom of an old woman who was in the temperance movement, i.e., she didn't approve of booze. She supposedly threw cocktail napkins around. I can't remember whether she was supposed to have broken glasses, etc. I was about 10 when I first started seeing ghosts. I usually go to sleep on my side, and at the time, I had things hanging on the door with my bed right next to it. So the last thing I'll see will be my door. One night I had trouble sleeping and woke up to find a clear female ghost with a bluish tint, piercing white eyes, and ripped clothes like she had some type of accident. Clothes resembled pajamas or a nightgown, she had long hair, and she wasn't looking at me but straight behind me out my window. Without removing my gaze from her, I got up and turned the ceiling fan light on, and with the sudden flash of the light, she disappeared. I examined the door and everything on it, and once I turned the light back off, I didn't see her again. The next night the same thing happened, but this time it was a man who was much taller wearing what appeared to be overalls and holding a pitchfork. He had a full head of dark curly hair with a straw hat, and I was even able to see his beard stubble and plaid pattern collared shirt underneath his overalls. Again, just like the woman, he was staring out the window behind me, and again I turned on the light and turned it off to see it was just the things hanging on my door and my mind playing tricks on me, but nothing was there when I turned it back off. I asked my family if they knew anyone who resembled the people in my room, and they didn't know who the woman was, but they had several ideas on who the man was, but since they didn't see it, they weren't sure. People have had a hard time believing my story in the past because of how clearly I saw them and the details I could remember. They have also been surprised that I was so young and would think to inspect my door, and I would tell them I was scared, but I wanted answers. Now, I have removed everything from my door to eliminate the possibility that shadows are simply playing tricks on me. I used to clean commercial buildings at night in my early 20s. I came across an offer that was 2 nights a week. I accepted and started cleaning. Every time I walked into that building, something felt off. I often get scared cleaning at night, but that's because I'm a woman. Oftentimes I have to take trash and recycling outside by myself at night. But at that building, I I was scared inside. I would walk in, lock the door, and go about my business. It was your typical office building, and it had 2 floors with a very tiny elevator. When I would clean, I always had to have my back to a wall or a corner. If I kept it open, the hairs on the back of my neck and arms stood up. I felt someone was behind me. The bottom floor felt safer. The cafeteria was okay. I would love cleaning in there because I didn't have to be near a wall. Upstairs, however, on the main floor, it was horrible. I seriously questioned quitting because I was so uncomfortable. The last night I worked there was a Wednesday. It started out the same, hairs on the back of my neck. So, I decided to clean quickly. Once I finished cleaning, I made sure to turn off all the lights. The hallway light was the worst because it was at the end of the hallway, and you had to walk back in the dark. I turned it off and walked sideways with my back facing the walls. Then grabbed all my trash and my recycling and went out the back. Walking outside, I felt relief. I exhaled and threw my trash in the bin. Then it happened. The hairs stood up on the back of my neck, and I felt uneasy. I turned around slowly and saw the window of one of the offices. There was a light. I saw a black shadow illuminated by a low light in the office window. It looked female. I felt like I was being electrocuted. I couldn't move. I watched this shadow reach up a hand and turn off a lamp. And the office went dark. I quickly ran around the building to the front parking lot to see if anyone was parked. Maybe I saw an office worker that snuck in. Nobody was there. I quit. The thing is, I turned off every light, and I knew every office. The 4th office that I saw into that night didn't have a lamp by the window. It had one on the desk out of view of the window. I've seen all kinds of things cleaning at night, but never that and never again. I'd like to add that I don't believe in this stuff. Yet. I saw what I saw, and I don't understand why. I'm more willing to believe I lost my mind temporarily. Mine was a demon encounter. A possession. It still affects me to this day, but I'll get to that. A little background. I am a 34-year-old female who has been obsessed with the paranormal ever since this incident. I know they say that trauma can go 2 ways. Complete repulsion of whatever subject the trauma was about, or obsession. I got the obsessive part. Thankfully, I've learned to control it. For an extended period, I harbored an unhealthy obsession, driven solely by a desire for answers. I don't really care if people don't believe me. I decided to share my story because it terrified me and continues to haunt me to this day. I was 10, and my cousin was 11. We were playing in my front yard, and all of a sudden her head dropped. I asked her if she was okay. When she picked up her head, I could see the whites of her eyes. I froze. When her eyes rolled back to normal, they were pure black, and her face was distorted into this terrifying grin. She was drooling, and then it spoke. I say it because she was no longer her. It was a demonic but raspy voice. Laughing at me. Asking me my worst fear. I was beside myself. I was 10, I had no idea what was happening. I told him my fears and then he immediately started laughing and telling me that I would be our pet when I was older. I had no idea what that word meant yet. He then told me that he would follow me for the rest of my life. Once or twice a year he will come to me in my dreams. Every time he does, he's just laughing and saying, "I told you so, you dumb girl," and I cannot speak because he has sewn my mouth shut. I wake up screaming and crying. But he was right. That did happen to me. Multiple times. I have never been that scared in my entire life. All of a sudden her head dropped again, and when she picked it back up, she was herself again. Absolutely no recollection. I was shaking, and I was terrified of her. She couldn't understand why, and I couldn't understand what had happened. I recently just told my mom about it. She freaked out and told me that the house that my cousin lived in back then had a demon in it. It all made sense. But for years I researched everything I could about demons. It became an obsession. As I said before, I have it under control now and just live my life. I obviously still love the paranormal. I wouldn't be on this page if I didn't. However, I do have my PTSD moments, and every single therapist I've had has no idea how to help me when my feelings arise because they're not trained in that sort of trauma. It's been a wild ride, and every night before I go to bed, I can't help but wonder if it's the night he'll come to me in my dreams. If you listen to all that, thank you. I have a feeling sharing this all out for the first time might help me. I have a few. Me and my sister grew up in our home, and we always knew there was a ghost. Going downstairs to do laundry, and the dryer door would open and slam shut on its own, that sort of thing. My sister was always mad because the ghost would be stealing her stuff and putting it in other places of the house. She came upstairs and said she kept taking her wallet. She put her wallet on the kitchen table, and I asked her what she meant. We looked down, and the wallet was gone, and we both went back down to her bedroom, and it was sitting on her bed. Those were just little things that happened all the time. One night my youngest sister came home from work, and I and my second sister were in my bedroom being warm and cozy in bed just chatting. We heard my sister come home, and she went into my other sister's room too. Probably wanted to sleep with her after work because it was cold. About 20 minutes ago, and I'm wondering why she hasn't come in to say hi at least. Then she opens the door and says to me, "Move over, Sarah is freezing and not very cuddly tonight." Then Sarah looks at her and says, "What do you mean? I'm right here." Then she said, "What the hell am I cuddling with then?" We all got up out of bed, and Scooby-Doo went down to the room, turned on the light, and half the bed was made up perfectly, and the other half was messy where my sister was. And she said she climbed into bed and saw Caitlin lying there, so she crawled in and cuddled up to spoon her and was playing footsie with her, but she was freezing cold. And she couldn't warm up, so she came in to snuggle up with me. Footies? Yeah, so that one was weird. Same house, I was downstairs watching TV, and the phone rang. When I answered, I discovered it was for my mom. Like a typical teenager, I put down the phone handle, stood at the bottom of the stairs, and screamed up for my mom to answer the phone. Got back on the phone, waited for her to pick up, and there was no answer, so I told the person to hold on again and went back to the bottom of the stairs. My mom was on top of the stairs in her nightdress and her glasses, and she was just staring down at me. And I looked at her and said, "Mom, the phone is for you. You have to pick it up." She didn't say anything, and she turned around and just went to her room. I went and picked up the phone, but there was no answer. So I told the person that I'd run up and get her. As I went up the stairs into her bedroom, frustrated that she wasn't listening, I noticed that there was no one in her room. Then I hear something behind me, and it's my mother coming in the kitchen with bags of groceries, fully dressed. Of course, I'm absolutely confused and said that she was just standing on top of the stairs in her nightgown and with her thick Scottish accent said, "Don't be ridiculous. I just walked in from the grocery store, help me." Okay, now this is in my house with children. My partner at the time said that he can hear the kids whispering at night all at the same time in different rooms. He also said he heard a deep voice talking back to them. I thought he was just being silly and over the top and probably just heard someone sleep talking. One night I got up to go to the bathroom, and I could hear all the kids talking in different rooms all at the same time, and I thought that was really creepy. When I came out of the bathroom, I could hear another voice talking back to them. Like a deep older woman's voice, which of course freaked me out. I played it off, of course, but I am absolutely sure I and my partner heard the same thing. No idea who the other voice was. My sister was putting ornaments on the Christmas tree, and she said a big chunk of her hair was taken and pulled up towards the ceiling and just floated there for, like, a minute straight. She pulled it back down, and then it got pulled back up again. She's so used to having a ghost around here, so she didn't really think too much of it, but no thanks. I saw something creepy as a child. I was in the 4th grade when this happened. I was staying at my friend's house, who had shared numerous stories with me about the various hauntings in her home. They even had a creepy old doll room. I remember the vibe of her house freaked me out in general, but then one night my friend decided to randomly hide from me. I looked around for her and couldn't find her, knowing she was just messing with me. Continuing my search, I entered her room and noticed that her bathroom door was slightly open, allowing me to see in. I could see her standing behind the door. I could make out the clothes she was wearing and everything. I started speaking to her, but as I stepped closer, I froze because I realized that wasn't her. The figure seemed almost pixelated in a way. And it was wearing a creepy sort of grin. The eyes were darkened too. I quickly turned and ran out of her room, and as I rounded the corner, my friend jumped out at me from behind her TV. I asked her if she had been in her room just then, and she said no, so I told her what I'd seen, and we went to investigate. The craziest part is that whatever the hell that was still there. She could see it too. We freaked out and ran to a different part of her house, but I don't think I'll ever forget what I saw that night. Alright, so my ex-girlfriend was a witch. She was an actual practicing witch. One night, she asked me to come with her to this ritual she was doing for one of her clients. It was late, like midnight, and we ended up in this creepy spot where this old railway crossed this half-abandoned road. This is the type of location that instills a sense of unease even before any events transpire. So, she and her client were off about 50 meters away, doing their thing, and I was just chilling in the van, watching from a distance, keeping an eye out, you know? At first, everything seemed fine. But then, out of nowhere, I heard this scream. And when I say scream, I mean it was guttural, like nothing I'd ever heard before. The sound caused my blood to freeze. I jumped out of the van, and that's when I saw them. My ex was sprinting toward me, dragging the client behind her. And the client? Holy shit, she looked possessed. Her face was all twisted, and her body was moving in this jerky, unnatural way, like she wasn't even in control of herself. My ex screamed at me to get in the van and drive to this church nearby. Apparently, she knew it had a 24-hour chapel with holy water. I didn't give it any thought, I simply complied. When we got there, she started saying some stuff I didn't understand and splashed the holy water on the client. Suddenly, she snapped out of her trance. It was as if she suddenly turned on a switch. 1 second she was this possessed nightmare, and the next, she was just her. She went from being freaked out and confused to being normal again. After we dropped her off at home, my ex admitted she'd never seen anything like that before, and honestly, neither had I. They never spoke again after that, and I don't blame them. To this day, I still have no clue what I saw that night, but it was real. Too real. It was so insane it made me question, like, literally everything. I know what happened to Marjorie West. Note, it's been a few years since one of the craziest experiences I've ever had, and I think it's time to share it. I hadn't heard of this case before this experience I'm going to tell you about. I feel like it is also important to note that I had never seen anything like this before or since this incident. My friend, 28 female, and I, 26 female, were driving through the middle of farmland in northeastern Pennsylvania. We were listening to music and engaging in a normal conversation when suddenly I blurted out, "There's a dead body over there," while looking across a field towards the woods. I have absolutely no idea where that came from, and there was no thought before the words came out. The words just came out of my mouth. My friend looked at me incredulously, all she could say was, "What?" That's when I felt the goosebumps start on the back of my neck. They traveled up and around my head and down through my shoulders to the rest of my body. I could feel in that moment that someone was sitting in the middle of the back row of my car. I looked at my friend, we made eye contact, and I knew she felt this presence too. That's when the tears started. They flowed from my eyes quickly, and I know they weren't really my tears. I could feel the fear and sadness of whoever was in my back seat. I said, "There's someone in the back seat," and my friend said, "I know." We drove in silence for the next 5 minutes until we got back to the house. In the silence I saw a flash of dirty strawberry blonde hair. It was curly, but the curls were loose and falling out. I saw a flash of dirty blue fabric. I didn't stop crying. When we got back to the house, we walked up the front porch, and I was so shaken that I couldn't remember the code for the front door. I turned to look at my friend, and standing beside us was a little girl. She was small, I guess 3 or 4. She had on a dirty light blue dress with frilly sleeves. Her hair was curly and strawberry blonde, but it was messy and dirty. I could only see one side of her face, but it was decomposing. Badly. I didn't take my eyes off the girl, but I said to my friend, "Do you see that too?" And she said, "Yes, I see her." I turned away, closed my eyes, and kept saying, "I don't want this, I don't want to see this." I finally unlocked the door, and we stumbled inside. Both shaken, my friend and I sat at the kitchen table in silence for a moment, then we recounted everything that we saw and felt. We saw the same things. We felt the same things. As we were compiling details, I had an idea. I pulled up the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database on my phone. I entered Pennsylvania as the location, specified an age range of 3 to 5 years for age missing, and selected female, white, and red hair as additional criteria. As I was scrolling, my friend remarked, "She went missing quite some time ago, perhaps in the 1930s or 1940s? So I added those parameters to the search. I continued to scroll, and there weren't many results left. My friend said, "Her name starts with an M. It's a longer, older name. Maybe Margaret or." That's when I found her profile. "Marjorie," I said. My friend lit up and said, "Yes," I said, "her name was Marjorie West," and showed her the picture of the girl we just saw standing on the porch. Marjorie West was 4 years old when she went missing from White Gravel, Pennsylvania, on May 8, 1938. I was a skeptic for most of my life, I guess I still am in most cases, but I've experienced things that can't be explained away by logic. While I have felt presences before and since, Marjorie West is still to this day the only spirit I have ever seen. My friend has seen a few throughout her life, but more often she hears them. This is what Marjorie told her. Marjorie was taken by a bad man. She was scared, and she wanted her mom. We believe that bad man drove Marjorie across the state. He ended her and dumped her in the woods, in what was, and still kind of is, the middle of nowhere. Now this is what we told Marjorie. We told her we were sorry for what happened to her. We told her she could stay on my family's property. It's a peaceful place, and my friend and I have felt other peaceful presences on the farm, so she wouldn't be alone anymore. It seems there are a few theories out there about what happened to Marjorie West. You may believe in the paranormal, or you may not, but I know what we saw and what we felt that day, and I know what happened to Marjorie West. Played hide and seek with a shadow person. When I was younger, I lived with my grandparents. In their basement, against the very back wall, was the computer, and one day I was playing on it. I can't remember what I was doing exactly, but I had my back to the open doorway that led straight to the stairs. The washer and dryer were under the stairs, and my grandma was over there doing laundry. I had turned around in my chair to tell her something, and standing in the doorway was a tall, big shadow man. As soon as I caught sight of him, he turned and ran to the opposite side of the basement. I distinctly remember even seeing his shoulder move and his leg arch to the side like when someone is running. I jumped up and ran to look down the basement, and he was gone. Now there was a second open doorway down the other end of the wall too, so I started peeking back and forth, and every other time it seemed like I would catch a split second of it. I don't know, I had a lot of experiences in their basement, but this was the craziest one lol. Demon portal. Years ago, when my kids were teenagers, they were friends with a Wiccan kid. He told them how his father experienced sleep paralysis every single night of his life and how he, the kid, knew how to cast spells and such. Well, my kids had this Wiccan kid over, and they played Bloody Mary. After that, my kids kept hearing knocking on their walls, inside the walls, on the outer walls, inside closets, etc. This seemed to happen as they were falling asleep or waking up. Around this time, they also created what they called a demon portal. I'm not sure if this kid taught them how to do it or they learned it online. Either way, they had a piece of paper with a bloody handprint on it, and they put it inside the closet in the room with this knocking. I think they were hoping to stop the knocking, but I don't know. Also, I had no idea they were doing all of this, I just heard about it later. My middle son told me that a few days after making this paper, he was playing the piano downstairs. While playing all alone in the living room, a small scrap of paper fluttered down onto his piano keys. It was a small, torn corner of a page. He stopped playing and looked at it and wondered where it could have come from. Later, while looking in his closet, he saw that a corner of the paper was missing from his demon portal paper. He went back to the piano to find the scrap, and it fit exactly to the torn corner that was missing. He tore the page out of the closet, crumpled it, and threw it away. I found the crumpled paper in the outside bin while throwing out more trash, but I was so creeped out that I left it there. I asked my kids about it, and my son told me a story about it. I instructed them to refrain from doing anything similar in the future. So I thought it was all over, but it wasn't. I worked at home, alone, while my kids were at school. I started hearing noises like cabinets slamming or doors slamming while I was working. I would stop to check it out but saw nothing except once my cat hiding under the stairs, so I thought the cat was doing it. Once my sister drove by my house when we were not home, and she saw the lights in my home office turn off and on. She knew we weren't home, so she called and got a key from my mom and checked it out, but no one was in my house. My kids were also absent on weekends, accompanying their dad. I started hearing noises at night, inside the house, like chairs being moved around in the kitchen on the tile floors. Upon going downstairs, I found nothing amiss. I just started locking my bedroom door at night, just in case. One weekend, I heard all sorts of chairs moving downstairs. I had one of those oak dining sets in a country style in my kitchen. But it sounded like chairs were being dragged through the house on the wood floors in the living room. I was like, absolutely not, I am not opening that door. No matter what sounds I heard, the sound of all the commotion convinced me that I would see a poltergeist-style chair pyramid in my house in the morning. It was very difficult to sleep, but I still didn't open that bedroom door until daylight. My bedroom was at the top of the stairs. When I opened my door in the morning, I saw one single kitchen chair facing the staircase at the bottom of the stairs. My kitchen was 2 rooms away. I could just feel the blood draining out of me at the sight of that chair. I was surprised to find that only one chair was responsible for all the loud sounds, but it confirmed that something strange was indeed happening. That was a Sunday, and I was headed to church anyway. I went to church and asked for a blessing on my house that day. No more chairs moving after that. My children still reported the knocking inside the walls from time to time. Eventually, they grew up, and all but one moved away. I sold that house, and the new owners later told me it was haunted. They sold it after a few years. The new owners after them had it a few years and are selling it now. I still hear an occasional knock behind my headboard or inside my walls, and I live at another house. And for some reason, I and my kids all feel an urge to buy back that old house. Something was under my bed. As far as paranormal experiences go, this is probably one of the scariest ones that I've had, even though it wasn't really that extreme compared to a lot of stories I've heard and read. Either way, it happened sometime in 2013, when I was 19. I had my bedroom located in the basement of my dad's house. It was late at night, and I lay there on my bed in complete darkness. I needed to sleep because I had school the next day, but I suffered from insomnia back then and felt too energetic to fall asleep. I lay there for a good while with thoughts swirling around in my mind when I suddenly heard some kind of noise. I opened my eyes, but as I mentioned before, it was completely dark. I started to think I had imagined it, but then I heard it again. A scratching. From there it went on, getting more and more intense, and I quickly realized the noise was coming from underneath my bed. My eyes widened, and panic spread throughout my body. It sounded as if someone was frantically clawing on the floor. Did I leave one of the cats in here before I went to bed? I thought, trying everything to rationalize the situation. But I already knew, not even a cat could make that kind of noise. Then I felt something, like a scratching and punching against my back from underneath my mattress. The best way I can describe the whole thing is to imagine some poor soul being trapped inside a coffin, desperately trying to break out, and I was on top of that coffin. I was paralyzed by the shock of it all, not knowing what to do. After I had been lying there for a good while with the scratching and punching still going on, my fear eventually turned into some kind of rage. I jumped out of bed, ran across the room, and turned on the lights. Then I threw myself on the floor, looked under the bed, and yelled, "What do you want from me?" Nothing was there. The scratching had stopped, and there was no one in the room except me. Somehow I managed to fall asleep after that experience. A couple of months later, a friend of mine from school moved into our house. She rented a room for my dad on the top floor. After she had been there for 3 nights, she came to me in the morning and said she'd had the craziest thing happen to her during the night. I could almost feel my skin turn pale as she told me the story of the exact same thing that had happened to me. The scratching, the punching against the mattress. I knew for certain that I had never told her about my experience. When I told her that the exact same thing had happened to me 2 floors down, months earlier, we both freaked out. Dog thing in the driveway, apparition in the walk-in, and another window ghost. The first story I want to share comes from my mom. She was living on the Olympic Peninsula in WA state about 2 years ago, outside of Port Angeles. My mom would call me in the middle of the night, saying she was hearing weird animal noises. My whole family are pretty sensitive to weirdness, so I took her seriously, and on one occasion she even held the phone out the window one night so I could hear the weird noise she was describing to me. We talked about how it sounded like some kind of territorial call or mating call. My mom and I have lived in the PNW for about 25 years, and neither of us has ever heard anything like that noise, but then again, we have always lived in urban areas and not rural ones. So, one night I'm ducking around online, and my mom calls, and she's all freaked out. She proceeds to tell me that she was leaning out her bedroom window smoking when she saw something in her driveway, which was long, unpaved, and straight, hanging out under the street light. She thought it was a really big dog until it stood up and walked into the woods by their property. She was obviously super creeped out by this, and when she told me, I was creeped out, too. We have discussed various theories on what it was, from Bigfoot to a tulpa-like thought form to a shapeshifter, but have no real explanation for the weirdness that she saw. My next story comes from my friend and housemate, who works at a pub and brewhouse in the town where I am currently living. She said she was in the walk-in freezer at her job, getting some frozen whatevers, when she noticed someone standing very close to her. She had not heard anyone come in the walk-in, and at first she thought it was one of her coworkers. She then told me that as soon as she realized that it wasn't a coworker, she got the impression of a female face with straggly hair and an open mouth and that it looked like the lady was vehemently trying to tell my housemate something. My friend said that as soon as she began to freak out, the lady was gone. Recently there has been some speculation as to whether or not her work is haunted, but I'm still not 100% sold since the walk-in freezer throws some intense electromagnetic fields, and those have been known to cause hallucinations. The last story I have is a personal experience that needs a bit of prefacing. In the Seattle metro area there is a light rail that runs from Seattle to the airport in SeaTac. When I still lived up that way, I would ride the light rail a lot. There is a big, white, abandoned house on a hill in Tequila that the light rail passes directly by, and I have to say, even the very first time I rode the light rail, I was absolutely fascinated by this house. Just captivated. I always looked forward to riding the light rail because I got to see this particular house. So, a year or so later, some friends of mine and I are driving through the Tequila area. The house pops into my head, and I get excited, telling my friends we should go look for it. They agree, and we begin winding our way through neighborhoods to find this house. We drive up the hill through a sparsely housed area, through a half-finished new housing development, and end up at a sort of dead-end cul-de-sac with the abandoned white house, another abandoned garage-type area, an inhabited house, and another abandoned building. We get out, and by this time I am super stoked to be there. As soon as we get inside I feel totally peaceful and happy, talking about how badass the house is and how I love it, want to squat there and never leave, etc., etc. My friends told me that I was being really weird and creepy, but I didn't think so. I was just totally in love with this big, hulking old ruin of a house. Immediately, upon exploring the downstairs, I feel this intense pull to go upstairs. I started telling my friend A that we needed to go upstairs, that I have to go up the stairs, and I started to go up the staircase. My friend A has a shit fit, tells me she has a crunchy feeling, and pulls me back down the stairs. A and my other friend had decided it was time to leave, and I was so sad, like crushingly sad, that my friends wouldn't let me go to the second floor. So, with them dragging me out of there, we go back to the car. As I'm walking away, I turn around to gaze up at the house and see a face in the top window for just a second. I feel like there was some kind of entity attached to the house that was calling me upstairs, and it decided to show itself to me through the window because I didn't have a chance to go to the second floor. When I was about 6, I lived in a duplex in a Section 8 housing project with my dad and my brother, who is 2 years older than me. The place had an upstairs, but it was blocked off. We lived there for maybe a year, but during that time several things would happen. During the summer, the thermostat, which neither my brother nor I could reach, would get cranked up to 80 degrees a few times every week. Sometimes there would be a really loud crash upstairs, like something heavy had been slammed on the floor. It would sometimes get really cold. One night, my brother woke up, and he was being choked. He ran to my dad's room, and there were red marks around his throat. We went and stayed with my grandparents and moved to another duplex a few blocks away about a month later. Not long after, the place burned down. This happened to me about 6 years ago. I'm a very stable, late 40s, married mom of 3. I'm an American but have lived in northern Germany with my family, in a small, relatively rural community, for 20 plus years. I know this environment very well and am bilingual. As I often used to do, I would load my female Labrador Retriever into my car and drive about a mile outside of our village into the countryside a little so my dog could get out and run free. She was a wonderful dog, attentive and very devoted to me. She stayed in my area when we were out in the country, and we both stayed relatively close to my car. I would smoke a cigarette out there, and she would run around. We were always there in daylight, and sometimes there was a jogger or a farmer on a tractor in the distance, but we were normally alone, and again, this is a very safe area. Because I'm an American, probably, I am nevertheless semi-hyper attentive to my surroundings and, always carry pepper spray. Plus, I have the big dog. The landscape is low and sparse, brushy. A few big scattered trees, but mostly flat marshland, and you can see all around you. You can see through and between the foliage to see a rabbit run, for example, and the land is vast, sparse, flat, and marshy. So we always drove down to the end of a dirt road, not into a clearing, just into a flat, low brush, high visibility country field landscape. Okay. So 2 things happened in this same location, with just me and my dog present, on 2 separate occasions. They might seem like no big deal, but I don't understand, and although I was never frightened, I've always been bothered. The first thing that happened was that I, with my dog, she actively watched this event, observed a small brown leaf, just a regular dead, dry tree leaf, hanging suspended, moving only about an inch in any direction, in front of us for at least a full minute. Let me explain, there was no wind, no invisible spider web or filament holding it. No tree or bush suspending it. It hung, moving slightly, independently, in the air in front of us, between us. Directly in front of me, at my eye level, my dog looked up to it. I plucked it out of the air, and we left, drove home. I wasn't frightened, but it was memorable and odd. My dog fixated on the leaf as well. When it was in my hand, I showed it to her directly, and as I said, we packed up and left. But it was like watching magic, I stood there and watched it. During another trip to the same local location, I heard someone call to me in broad daylight within this same time period. I appreciate your patience, so let me explain. In this sparse, German rural countryside, with only my dog present, I heard this sentence, "Julie, I can see you." I heard it clearly from a specific direction, and it sounded like a low shouted voice, not too far away. Like 100 to 200 yards away, was the feeling of distance/volume. Obviously, no one was there, flat fields and low brush weeds, nowhere to hide or stalk. There's no point in a secret approach. Even worse, although I didn't recognize the voice, I would say it was male, it was absolutely in non-accented/native English, so this was not a German person, and anyway there was no person present. If there had been, I would have, of course, been terrified, but my dog and I were completely alone, as far as my eyes could see. I still can't explain this. What freaked me out was not just clearly hearing the voice or even my name, but rather the perfect sounding neutral American English of that voice in such an environment, which seemed to be directed at me. Do you guys get me? I'm in the middle of nowhere in Germany. I have a regional American accent. This was a moderate tone, like a newscaster. I know exactly what I heard. My dog did not react to this call, this voice that said exactly what I wrote above. She didn't seem to register it at all. We packed up and went home. I can't explain this. I'm a spiritual person, open-minded, and a religious believer. This hasn't changed me or even traumatized me. But it happened just like I've written, and while both experiences did not feel frightening or threatening, they definitely felt strange and otherworldly, if you will. I can't reconcile these moments. Anything involving drugs/side effects, mental health, audio disturbances, hidden stalkers, or stress/trauma can, fortunately, be excluded from theories. Trust me, I have considered every possibility. I'd love to hear what anyone thinks. The creepiest experience I've had occurred in the woods. I was sitting in a tree stand about 20 minutes before sunset, so you could still see pretty well. I heard my name being called and came here and heard laughing coming from behind a rock pile. There really wasn't a way to get behind it without being seen. It went on for 10 to 15 minutes in total, just every couple of minutes, my name, come here, and 2 times of just laughing. The first time it happened I thought it was one of the guys I was hunting with. There was a bunch of us together that weekend, and we used to do things to mess with each other from time to time. Except no one came out from behind the pile. When we did stuff, something was said 1 to 2 times, and then whoever was doing it would come out from wherever. I sat there listening to it for 10 to 15 minutes, not making a noise. I sure as shit wasn't coming down and kept my rifle pointed at the pile. It was an hour after dark before I climbed down. I waited a good 45 minutes after the talking stopped before I left. I never saw/heard anything approach or leave. I got a few more chances to hunt that property before it was sold. I turned down each one. The old owners. This story happened to me and my girlfriend. This is one of my scariest encounters with the paranormal. Before we start the story, I want to offer you this advice: be aware of the places you visit or the houses you enter, as sometimes you may not be welcome there. This story happened in the year 2009, after my graduation from college. At that time, my girlfriend and I planned a vacation far from our hometown to spend time together. We picked this old town on the top of the mountain. Our love for nature fueled our decision. When we reached the old town, we spoke with a local tourist guide and asked her if she knew where we could rent a house, as we were planning to spend some vacation time there. The tourist guide informed us that she owns several houses, and then we all went to the location where the houses are situated. When we arrived there, we saw 4 houses. 3 are for rent, and the other one is where our tourist guide is staying. Then the tourist guide shows us the houses that are for rent, 2 small houses and 1 big house. Those houses are a little bit far from each other. I asked the tourist guide how much to rent a house, and she told us the prices for each house, and I was surprised that the small houses are expensive but the big one is cheap. So I picked the big house. Because we can have a lot of space and it's cheap. I remembered before we entered the house. I asked the tourist guide, "Why is this house cheaper? Is it haunted?" Then my girlfriend looked at me, and I laughed. But the tourist guide did not answer, she just looked at me awkwardly. So I just ignored it. And when we entered the house, the first thing I noticed was the old furniture. And the tourist guide left us. But before she left, she gave us her number and told us that if we need anything, we can call her, or we can just go to the last house where she is staying. So we unpacked our things, and we rested for that day. Our first night there was so great, the air is fresh and it's cold. Then in the morning we explore the place, and the scenery is so beautiful. Then we go back to the house and spend our second night there. But when we woke up in the morning, my girlfriend told me that she heard sounds coming from the kitchen around 12 a.m. She said, "I think I heard someone cooking." So I answered, "Maybe you heard someone in the other house, not here." Then we just ignored it and continued our day. Then on our third night, my girlfriend woke me up around 12 a.m. So I asked, "What happened?" And she told me she heard the sound again, and she felt someone sit at the side of our bed. So I stood up and checked the kitchen, and I saw nothing. So I came back to the bed and told her maybe it's just rats or some kind of critters. And we continued sleeping. I remembered that night my girlfriend was scared. I can feel it when she hugs me. When we woke up in the morning, my girlfriend told me she wants to go home. She keeps on telling me that the place is haunted. But I didn't believe her that time. I said, if you want to go home, you can go. But I will stay for a few more days because I'm enjoying the scenery. So we agreed that she can go back home and I can stay there for a few more days. So my girlfriend goes back home that day, and I am left there all alone. Then scary stuff happened on my fourth night. It happened again around 12 a.m. Some sound woke me up. It's like kids laughing and playing outside the house. So I stood up to get out of the room and walked towards the front door. I opened the front door slightly to see what's happening outside. Then I saw 5 kids, like 5 to 6 years old. They are playing in the trees in front of the house. So I'm thinking, at that time, where were the parents of these kids? And why are they playing in the middle of the night? So I opened my door and got out of the house, but when I looked at the kids, no one was in there. So I told myself maybe they just ran away, and I went back to sleep. Then my 5th night happened. Around 12 a.m. again, I heard someone knocking at the front door, so I stood up again and got out of the room and walked to the front door. Then I slightly opened the door to see who's knocking. I saw an old lady and an old man standing at my front door. The old lady is just standing, but the old man is knocking. So I asked them, how can I help you? And the old man said with a raspy voice, where are the owners? Where are the owners? So I answered, walked in that direction, and the last house, that's the owner's house. Then I closed the door because I was getting cold and I felt creeped out. Then I went back to bed, and in the morning I went to the tourist guide and asked her if she saw the people that were looking for her. And she said no, and why? I told her that an old lady and old man knocked on my door looking for her that night. And I remembered the face of the tourist guide turned pale. So I told her I can't really remember because I was too tired that night. Then I went out and ate and went to the hot spring. Then the 6th night, this is the night I can't forget in that place. I woke up again around 12 a.m. because I couldn't breathe properly, and then when I opened my eyes, I couldn't move. Then I looked at the side of my bed, there I saw the old lady standing and saying these words, we are the owners. I was shocked and scared, and I'm screaming, but I can't stand and move. And when I looked at my chest, I saw the old guy sitting down on my chest, and his eyes were looking at me, and he was very angry, shouting, who are you? Why are you here? I'm so scared and shocked that time that I can't think of what to say, so I just keep on saying I'm sorry. Then they just vanished, so I ran outside and far from that house. I called a good friend of mine and asked him to come and get me. And in the morning my friend goes back to that house to get my things and pay the owner. But I never went back to that house again until now. And I remembered it on the 5th night. When I heard the knock, they were not saying, where are the owners? They are saying, we are the owners. I have a ghost who follows me. She has been since I was about 6 years old. It's an 8-year-old little girl who became attached to me when we moved out of town and into a new house. She was already there but exposed herself to me within weeks of living there. She has followed me every day since then. She didn't like my last roommate. She would do scary shit like throw the clock off the wall. A knife came flying out of the dish rack and fell about 6 feet from where it was and landed in front of her child. We would be hanging out in my room, and we would swear we would see somebody walking up and down the hall very quickly, but nobody was there. When I am in the presence of negative energy or individuals, she takes measures to ensure my distance from them, which may include preventing me from sleeping at night or causing excessive perspiration that hinders my ability to rest, regardless of the temperature in my room. I get readings done by an African woman I know, and when I walked into her office for the first time, she asked me to stop right there so she could approach the girl. I have 2 daughters, but neither of them was with me that day. She also said she felt an evil energy following me. I told her he tries to come close but can never get closer than a foot near me. I told her it was her father, and I think he's upset that she chose to come with me. When we moved in that house, I felt the energy of the little girl, an older boy around 12, and a very abusive dad. I can tell he was a hard worker because I would hear the sounds of boots walking into the kitchen while I would be doing something. The landlord was hesitant to tell our family what happened or if anything happened, and he took it to his grave with him. Before his wife passed away years later, she told us on Halloween night in '89, the man went and ended several people through town before he went home and ended his 2 children and himself. I see things. Oh boy, do I have a few stories for you. I was driving with my brother and my dad. Dad was driving, I was in the back middle, and my brother was in the passenger seat. I and my brother were teens at the time. We were coming up on a red light, in broad daylight. It was one of those roads that you can only go left or right on, but straight ahead was a building with stairs and a railing. At the top of the stairs was a little platform that wrapped to the back. And on the railing was a big rug hanging over it, like it was drying out or something. I saw a man in a navy blue hoodie, jeans, and a hat push the rug off the railing and walk around the platform out of sight. My brother, Dad, and I go oh like you do when something big falls lol. And my brother says, whoa ha, you saw that rug fall too? And I go, yeah, I wonder why he pushed it down. And my dad and brother go, what do you mean? It just fell, and I swear to God I saw that man push the rug down, but both my dad and brother saw it fall on its own. I have chills, lol. Another, wilder but longer story. A few years back I got a clown doll, a corny basic horror movie item to get. I know it sounds fake Lamau. I have a clown obsession. I have, like, 30 clown-themed figures and pictures and paintings, I do clown makeup, etc., and if you like clowns, you know you have to get vintage figurines lol. So I get this old doll from a vintage shop and have no issues for years. Then we move out of our childhood home. As I was packing my things, I grabbed the doll and set it into a box. Instant feeling of nausea and head pressure. I took it out, as I had a weird feeling about putting him in a box. I already am aware I can see spirits at this age, so I get to Googling. I come to the conclusion he doesn't want to be put in the box. I read that some spirits don't like items they're attached to in boxes they can't see through, so I put him in a big glass lantern I had instead and still got nauseated and had head pressure immediately. I ended up talking to a family friend about it unexpectedly. She picked up on a weird energy between me and the spirit. She basically told me the spirit wanted to stay, to live through the doll in the house. I told the doll I'd leave it. Fast forward, and my grandma is selling the house. She tells me to throw the doll away, and it cannot stay. I try to tell my 70-year-old grandma the doll is haunted and has to stay, and of course she calls me insane and tells me to throw it away or she will. I'm not scared of no damn ghost, stop your shit, were her words, Lamau. So I put the doll in the crawl space so my grandma wouldn't throw it away. Stupidly, I promised the doll I'd be back, after grandma left, to let it out of the crawl space. I forgot, and 2 weeks later she was gone. Things started to get super creepy at the new apartment. Doors slamming, drawers opening, banging noises, etc. I then remembered I never let the doll out. The house wasn't sold yet, so I went and let him out of the crawl space. Nothing got better, doors were still slamming. At this point I couldn't be home alone. I was terrified I would sit in my car for hours waiting for my mom to get off work. My mom got fed up of me calling her crying over this spirit, so she started calling people and researching. Ash ends up putting the clown doll in a closet in a circle of salt. That was fine till a realtor was showing the house. This is what she told my grandma over the phone. She walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, and both she and the lady viewing the house froze. Then the realtor said she felt something touch her arm, and they both ran out of the house screaming. She called my grandma sobbing and yelling, saying she would not sell her house or step foot on the property again. And she also told the company, and no one would sell our house. My grandma called me and chewed my ass. BC, I didn't throw the doll away and scared the realtor Lamau. Another medium actually picked up on our energy and contacted my mom. Free of charge, she told us that the spirit won't leave me alone because I was the only one that could understand him. That he liked me. Obviously that freaked me and my mom out. She then told us to bury the doll with salt on the property. We did, and it worked. Have had no problems since. This story sounds so goddamn unbelievable, but that's my life pattern, I guess. Hope you enjoyed. I just had the craziest paranormal experience ever. So I, my girlfriend, and my daughter drove up to Laughlin, Nevada, to see some family after going to Parker, before heading back home to Los Angeles. My GF urged me to get a hotel room for me, her, and my daughter before driving back in the morning. My GF and daughter fell asleep around 10 p.m., and I was bored and couldn't sleep, so I went and played blackjack at a neighboring casino. I came back to my hotel room, got ready for bed, and laid down. I got quite thirsty and ultimately decided to go find a vending machine to get some water. The one on my floor wasn't working, so I thought I would take the elevator up to the next floor to see if that machine worked. When I got in the elevator, I immediately had a sinking feeling. I couldn't put my finger on it, so I just kind of shook it off. I was staying on the second floor and hit the 3 button to go up and find a working vending machine. When I clicked the button, nothing happened, and the doors were already shut. I immediately started hitting the 3rd floor button and the open button, but nothing worked. All of a sudden I felt the elevator jerk to a seemingly unbelievable speed. If I had to guess, the elevator was moving at least 50 miles per hour. It took me all the way to the 16th floor without me pushing that button and stopped for about 45 seconds without the doors opening on that floor and then sent me back down to the second floor at the same insane speed. It honestly gave me super evil vibes the whole time I was in there, and I had a knot in my stomach the second I stepped in. When I got back down, I decided to take the stairs down to the casino lobby to find a place I could get water and explain to the cashier why I wasn't wearing any shoes. I tell him about the elevators and what happened, and he tells me the hotel is haunted, and the elevator I was in he had heard stories about many times. This scared the crap out of me. Wondering if anyone else has had any creepy experiences at the Tropicana Hotel in Laughlin? Honestly, the whole experience gave me complete backroom vibes. It was the first elevator on the right when walking into the promenade section up to the rooms. Even just walking around the hotel after to get back to the casino floor was super eerie and terrifying. It felt like someone was chasing me. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I'm writing this literally like 10 minutes after it happened, so excuse the franticness. I have this thing that has followed me since I was little. The older I got, the more this, I guess, shadow person would appear in front of me to make itself known. I eventually named it Gilbert because I thought that naming it that would make it less scary and more of an annoying sibling that peeks every now and then into my life. It was always a feeling of something there that I couldn't see. Cups being thrown, pets being scared to go in areas of the house, and handprints on the shower's steamed mirror when it was clean and no one was home. When I was around 14, I started to see him because it feels like a male energy. We lived in an apartment now with a short hallway leading from the main bedroom to the living room and front door entrance. I would walk back and forth to do stuff like getting ready and would look over to see a tall and scary male figure shadow man. It's those times you look to one side as you walk around doing something and then are shocked and look back again for it to be gone. I told my dad, who thought a homeless man might have just walked in Lowell. Then one day, when I was 16, Gilbert just walked into the room and stood there for a few seconds calmly and turned right into the hallway and walked off. No steps noise, no door opening noise, nothing. He was just gone. I just know I called my best friend, who lived 3 minutes away, to tell her how scared I was. I told her how it was looking straight at me as I was calling her and how he had just walked out of view. What I hated was when he peeked his head into a room I am in. It feels like he's saying, "Hey, I'm right here, don't forget that," but it's annoying as it scares me. It doesn't feel evil, just possibly confused and curious. I started to talk to it, saying, "Stop scaring me, it's getting annoying because you startled me." Gilbert has been there after I moved out with my best friend and boyfriend at 20. At 22, my now husband and I moved into our own place. My husband says he has never seen anything in his life to believe in ghosts or the paranormal, but he calls me when I visit family out of state to say that he can feel something or someone in the house with him. We have a dog that will stare at the corners of the house like she's looking at someone. He will experience misplaced things that will make him think someone was living in the house, like a squatter. After getting older, I learned more about shadow people. I'm not sure who or what he is. I don't even know what he's doing with me. Why me, and why has he been following me since I was a little girl? My parents would acknowledge something weird in the house, but they are Mexican and Christian, so talking to them about it was useless. The craziest thing to ever happen to me. And I live in Baltimore. Just to explain, I say the Baltimore joke because I've seen murders, bodies, kidnappings at gunpoint as a teen, and more. But this ducked with my head more than all that. This happened to me and my friend when I was about 17 or 18 and is the only paranormal thing to ever happen to me. I've been thinking about this experience more and more nowadays and don't know why. It's so crazy that it's unbelievable, and I wouldn't blame you for doubting it. But people who know me know I don't lie about shit. It might be a bit of a read, but maybe you will find it interesting. Here it goes. So living in Baltimore, there's a place called Loch Raven Reservoir, and it's out in the sticks. However, it can be reached quickly. Baltimore is weird like that. 10 minutes one-way woods, then 10 the next ghetto. So we would drive out to Loch Raven and smoke while driving the empty country roads. Well, on those roads is a turnoff to a park. It's been a while, but I'm kind of sure it's Cromwell Park. And it's not the kind of park you think, it's more just woods with trails. And you can only get there by driving. Roads are too small and dangerous to walk. Well, my friend and I went there one night to smoke. It was about 1 a.m., and we parked in the parking lot, which again is just a few spots for cars made from gravel. In front, behind, and to the right are trees leading to nothing but more woods. To the left, I'm driving, is a field. The field is a little more than a football field, I would say, and a football field wide till, you guessed it, more trees. Yes, very good. So we have a CD case I was breaking the butt up on while my friend prepared the blunt. It's pretty dark out except for some moon and starlight shining, and I just look to my left, and on the edge of the field where the trees start, I see what appears to be someone with a flashlight. It's far away, so I'm not worried about it and just say something to my friend like, "WTF is someone doing in the woods all the way out here at this time?" I continue breaking the bud up, and when I'm done, I pass it over to my friend, and he dumps it in the blunt to roll and lays the CD on the dash. While I'm waiting, I look to my left again, and now the lights are up in a tree. Not real high. Just a few feet. So I comment again, "Why the F is someone climbing trees at this time in the middle of nowhere?" He's just like, "F if I know." And then we start to hear some pops going off. Now I'm like, lol, okay, he's lighting fireworks off. So weird. The pops keep happening more and more. I had no idea that all hell was about to break loose. I'm looking over there, and the flashlight turns off, and the pops keep going. For some reason I had a thought, and when I thought it, my stomach got that scared feeling, and I said out loud to my friend, getting goosebumps thinking about this, "Why can't we see the fireworks going off?" At that exact moment the explosions got super loud and traveled across the field towards us. Like a string of explosions coming at us. It made it across the field in probably 3 or 4 seconds. The car was engulfed in explosions. I could feel them in my guts like fireworks do. The CD case vibrates off the dash, and they are going off like crazy. My friend, who has been through some stuff in his life, his mom stabbed his dad in his sleep while he was in the next room as a 13-year-old, so he's not easy to scare, is in tears, freaking out, begging me to leave, and absolutely pleading. I'm saying no. I want to know what the duck is happening. I turned my car back on because I felt bad for this clown in tears and was going to leave, but it all stopped as soon as the car turned on. I remember him saying it sounded like a stampede of horses going around the car. The area had fights from the Revolutionary War and red coats and blue coats in that area, and it was known for being sympathetic to the red coats and battles being fought in the area. Can't say that's what it was, or a ghost, or what. Just saying that's what came to mind. I emailed the park 10 or so years later and asked if anyone has ever said anything about anything paranormal to them before. They said no. Not one thing ever. I'm still baffled by what transpired that night. It's mind-blowing. I thought only movies had this kind of stuff, but since then I'm way more open-minded. I still believe a lot of people lie and or are just crazy. I hear stories on here where I think, bro, come on. You're full of it or need help. But this is what happened to me. Believe it or not, I don't care. But it's the only thing to happen to me. Felt the urge to tell someone. Thanks for listening to this if you did. When I was 10, my father took my sister and me on a trip to Virginia with his girlfriend. They picked and booked a hotel known for its ghosts and haunting and did not tell us. When we got there, it was pretty old. In great condition, but decorated and looking like something from the 19th century. Once we got to our rooms, my father told my sister and me to not leave the room after midnight. He never said why, just not to. It was late, so we ate and turned in for the night. We had picked up fast food on the way in. That night I couldn't sleep, so I got up. I started to wander around the hotel. I went to the end of the hallway and saw a boy, about my age, in a button-up shirt and trousers. He looked like an employee but was too young to be. I asked if there were any video games in the hotel. He looked at me oddly, then nodded yes. I followed him down the stairs and into the basement of this place. It was dark except for one room. To my right at the bottom of the stairs was a door, and it was open. In it there were people all dressed like it was the 19th century. I didn't catch this at first. When I did, I thought it was like some sort of time period fair, like the Renaissance fairs. A man walked up and appeared to have a conversation with the boy. He nodded his head. They all looked at me and smiled. There were carnival games and gambling games you'd find in the 19th century there. The boy took me to a game. Something like Plinko. Drop a circular piece of wood and hope it lands in a place for a prize. At this point I'm confused. There is light, more like fire than electric, and people talking, laughing, and having a good time. But no video games. No arcade. I asked again if there were video games, and this time I heard, games? Yes, look. But these were very rudimentary. Old, even, but it all looked new. As in current. I didn't understand at all. Then the boy told me he and his family had to leave and asked if I could come back tomorrow. I shook my head, I knew we were leaving. I said so and thanked him for showing me the recreation room. He walked me back to the staircase and told me to go back to my room. He also said I didn't want to be down there alone when the lights go off. He said it could be dangerous. He then walked back to his family. They all waved from inside the room. In fact, Every single person I could see had turned to wish me goodbye. It was odd. I walked up the stairs, went back to my room, and went back to sleep. The next morning I was telling my story to my father's girlfriend, and she became angry. She accused my father of telling me but never said what. While my father professed his undying love and innocence to her, the woman behind the counter came around and talked to me. She had me explain and describe everything. While I was doing so, she grew pale, and her eyes kept widening. She took a folded pamphlet from the desk and handed it to me. Told me to read it. I did. It explained that this was a haunted hotel. That the ghosts can be seen after midnight, and it had an old newspaper clipping reprinted in it. It describes a horrible fire that ended over a dozen people. Of note, an affluent family with a young boy that had owned the place. It took me a few seconds. I looked at her quizzically. She asked me to take her where the boy took me. So I did. Now my father and his girlfriend are still arguing, and my sister is sitting on the couch behind them in the lobby. The woman asked permission, and this was when my father's girlfriend stopped talking and looked at us walking down the hall. She followed. My father followed her. My sister stayed on the couch. We walked to the end stairwell and went down. To the right there was a door. It was closed. She unlocked it and swung it open, and it was empty. Not a thing was in it. No games. No people. Nothing. Not even the warm firelight. And it hit me. I wasn't afraid, but I was beyond confused. My father had always told me there were no such things as ghosts. But I had just spent time with them. She asked me, "Is this the room?" And I answered yes, but frantically. I ran around looking for any sign of the night before, and in the corner there was the apple bob bucket and the plinko game, and they were covered in dust and looked ancient. She said to me, "Are those the games?" And all I could do was nod. It was as if I lost my voice. We all walked back to the lobby, where my sister was sitting looking at a highlights magazine. My father's girlfriend says, and this finally sealed it for me, "We booked this place for one night." They are booked solid a year in advance. We were lucky to get this one night, and instead of seeing anything, your kid sees it all. What a waste. And proceeded to storm off to the car. The woman from the front desk was part owner, not an employee, and she explained it to me. There was a fire that killed some prominent members of the town during a carnival that went inside due to rain. At the time it was a house, not a hotel, well, a mansion, really, and those people I met were the original owners and the people that had built the house to begin with. She said it was an honor. That only one other person ever got to see that. The last moments before a drunk knocked over a lantern and started a fire that killed many people. A moment in time forever etched into the very building itself. Her husband had that pleasure, and it's what drove him to buy and renovate it to begin with. She bore witness to unexplained phenomena, but she never knew the truth of what her husband experienced until I told her what I experienced. It seems my father's girlfriend wanted to experience the paranormal and book this place. My father wanted to see the caverns and mountains and go fishing, so he agreed. They didn't tell my sister and me so we wouldn't be frightened. The big thing was to not leave your room after midnight. The drive to the hotel we spent the next weekend was uneventful. But I will never forget that as long as I live. When I moved into the international student apartment during my 2 years abroad, I expected culture shock, maybe some homesickness. I didn't expect ghosts. Everything began when one of my roommates, who lived alone in a 2-bed room, casually mentioned seeing the shadow of another person at night. She kept telling me it looked like a person lying on the other bed, breathing, sleeping. I didn't think much of it then. But the weirdness didn't stop there. During one of our evening get-togethers, a guy from another room suddenly screamed, startling all of us. He was pale and visibly shaken, claiming he had just seen a girl with long, dark hair peeking around the corner of my roommate's room. More stories followed by many different people who had visited us. Whispers of breathing in empty rooms. Footsteps in the kitchen when no one was there. Some weeks later, the girl I shared a room with asked me one morning, "Did you hear that last night?" She claimed she had heard breathing, some kind of snoring, and shuffling noises coming from the living room. Since she was rarely home, I assumed she had heard stories from the others and was now just trying to spook me. Basically, I stayed skeptical, until it happened to me. It occurred one afternoon, before it even got dark. My roommates were either in class or out, and the front door was locked. I was alone in my room, eating an early dinner and video calling my mom. While I was talking about my day, I suddenly heard strange sounds coming from the living room and froze. A faint shuffle. A low, steady, but somehow loud breathing. "Do you hear that?" I asked my mom. I suddenly understood what my roommate must have been talking about. My mom couldn't hear anything on the call and insisted I go check. As it sounded like someone had just opened the fridge, I really didn't want to leave my room. My mom kept telling me not to be ridiculous and to open the door. After some back and forth, I finally got up, slowly opened my door, and peeked into the living room. Suddenly, everything was calm. Silent and peaceful. The noise had stopped. Feeling a bit braver, I walked around the apartment, checked all the rooms, and made sure the front door was still locked. Satisfied, I went back to my room and shut the door. I looked at my mom, still on the video call, and it was her expression that scared me more than anything. She calmly said, "So? I guess that wasn't a black-haired roommate who just walked right into the room, right?" She had seen someone while I'd been checking the rooms. I left right away to wait for my roommates outside. Long story short, one of my roommates eventually decided to tell one of our teachers. By then, all of us were on edge. The teacher's response? A deep sigh, as though this wasn't the first time she'd heard something like it. "Oh. Some years ago, 4 girls died in a fire in the room directly above yours. Maybe that's why?" We looked it up. There are still news articles online about the fire. And about their deaths. My childhood home was crazy haunted. Tons of experiences because all the nasty things seemed to focus on me. In my late teens, I began to experience night terrors and sleep paralysis, which became so severe that I opted to work night shifts to avoid sleeping until dawn. This was the only way to prevent a bad night. Unfortunately for me, on one of my nights off, I was relaxing in bed watching TV and accidentally fell asleep well before sunrise. I was startled awake by someone calling my name frantically and shaking me. When I jolted awake and opened my eyes, the room was pitch black, somehow my TV was turned off, and next to me I saw a glowing woman looking down at me with this concerned look on her face. She wasn't standing on top of my bed, instead, she was positioned within it, with her legs appearing to pass through the mattress as if she were standing on the floor beneath. She looked right at me and said, "You have to wake up, he's coming." I couldn't move, like sleep paralysis, which I was very experienced with, but this was much different. Usually my sleep paralysis incidents were blurry, weird stuff happening in the dark, things I could barely make out. But this was clear, concise, and ducking terrifying, like I was truly wide awake but frozen in fear. She looked over to my door just as a black mass came right through the closed door, and she quickly floated toward it, like a flash of white light. They seemed to smash into each other, and I heard all kinds of screaming and yelling, like 2 people fighting to the death, right as I passed out again. When I woke up a few hours later, I was soaked with sweat. I'm talking soaked like someone pushed me into a swimming pool with my pajamas on, and my heart was pounding like I had just run a marathon. My experience, odd howling while camping. I only share this because in some hours of research I have no explanation for what I heard, and it's quite curious. Seemingly ironic, I really do not believe in paranormal events myself, period, I just never have. I feel this is the most paranormal event, or whatever, in my life. Also, I don't know where else to share this, as I still don't understand browsing subjects and whatnot, but I figured it's the best I'll do for now. But let me explain. So I did some winter camping in my home Canadian province of Alberta just this past weekend. All was very well until the first night, around 12, when I and the woman went out to the bathroom. We heard coyotes earlier, and I oddly even saw a moose that same day, so I was unalarmed hearing coyotes howl in the background. Until it seemed to stop in the matter of a minute or so, then followed a single animal howl closer with a more medium to low tone. But after about a minute of it, it started to sound like music was mixing in preceding the howl, not like a song, but almost a single note of a chime that would sort of change sound a bit. It went on for minutes, and she and I were completely dumbfounded. I tried taking a video of it, but my phone is just some $350 Moto, and the very mild sound I got out of the audio really sounded like nothing other than a few questionable sounds different from what I heard. The next morning we also asked the old-timers in the site next to us, and the lady explained they had pretty much the same experience. I have gone camping for probably close to a month in a given year for my entire life, and this is probably number 1 for the craziest thing I've experienced out in the bush just from pure astonishment. Again, I do not actually believe it was paranormal activity myself, but if anyone at all even understands what I said or has some related experience, I'm very curious. You also don't have to believe a word I said, but it was very much so true. My mom's mirror. So, my mom has this full stand mirror that my grandpa made her when she was a teen. She has had it forever, basically, and is super attached to it. I, on the other hand, am terrified of it and hate being near it. I often have unexplained experiences involving this mirror, like seeing things in it, dark, heavy feelings in the room that it sits in, etc. Well, recently, I had a baby, and he's 9 months now, crawling, learning, and doing all that tiring stuff that babies do. My mom lets me come over to take naps in her room while she watches my little one, which helps a lot, but her mirror is in her room. The first time I took her up on her offer, I had a dream about a little girl ghost that kept showing herself to me and then running away. I awoke all groggy and weird and very drained. I couldn't really explain why I was dreaming about her or if she was real or just my imagination. I eventually just said whatever and left it at that. The second time not much happened other than the fact that I just could not wake up. My body felt like a ton of bricks, and my limbs wouldn't follow any directions my brain sent their way. I got up at some point, but only because I could hear my son downstairs crying. This last time was the craziest of all. No dreams, I slept only an hour and a half, and everything that happened was just crazy to me. The ghostly activity actually started before I went to nap. I had taken my son upstairs to nap in his playpen, which is placed right in front of that mirror, and when I laid him down and stood up to leave, I heard whispering but couldn't make out any words. I shrugged it off and then went back downstairs. As I was chilling on the couch, I started hearing whispering again. I tried ignoring it, because honestly I didn't feel threatened in any way, and just kept playing around on my phone. After a while of that, I started hearing someone walking around upstairs. It couldn't have been my son, who was in a playpen and couldn't walk yet. Obviously I was a little shaken up but was still going to ignore it. Then I noticed this toy dinosaur thing lighting up. It has a big red button on top of its head that lights up when pressed. Normally, it goes off for a little while after it gets pressed, but this was way after my son was playing with it. And it was like it was just being pressed over and over. The preset sayings would never come all the way through, just kept going on like the first words or so. I thought that was creepy, and I started to get uneasy. A little bit after that I decided to go upstairs and take a nap as well. When I get into the room, I get that familiar feeling of uneasiness the mirror gives me, and I like side glancing at it and then just trying to ignore it. My little one was asleep and safe, so I wasn't worried about him. I crawled into bed and was on my phone for a couple more minutes when I started hearing the wordless whispers again. I ignored them again and tried falling asleep, but it felt like I was trapped between being awake and falling asleep. During that time I heard all sorts of creaking sounds, walking, etc. At one point it sounded like someone was rubbing their hand really fast across the blanket or sheets. Like a KSHH sound. Eventually I fell asleep and, like I said, was only asleep for an hour and a half. But an hour into my nap, my brother got home, he's 11, and came upstairs because he heard my baby. He was quiet, barely making any noise, but when he said something to my little one in a whisper, I woke up and got startled. After reassuring me that it was him and not some ghost person stalking me, he took my baby downstairs to let me rest a little longer. So I set my alarm for 30 minutes, fell back asleep, but instead of my alarm waking me up, I awoke 6 minutes early, and as I was opening my eyes, all I could see, all over the walls, were words. They were written very messily, and I couldn't make anything out at all, but it was all I could see for what felt like a long time but was really only a minute or so. When I turned my phone on to check the time, the words went away. But I was definitely on edge, and I was shaking. I tried to take a moment to calm down, but in the vanity mirror, which was looking towards the other mirror, something shifted and flew across it. I jumped up and got the hell out of there. When I told my mom, she just laughed. And my hubby made fun of me for always getting into these crazy ghostly situations. But I just came over to have a good time and relax. I did not want to be spooked by any crazy ghost. Anyways, I wanted to note that for the majority of the experience, I was alone with my son. It all started happening once my mom left to go do some Uber Eats deliveries. And when I woke up the second time, my brother and son were downstairs playing. If you were able to read this whole thing, let me know what you think. Am I just crazy? I, my sister, and a friend all experienced the same terrifying thing, separately. When I was about 9 years old, I lived in an old house with my family. The house had undergone many renovations and alterations over the years, and due to this, the original front porch that was adjacent to my room had been walled closed, creating a really long corridor-like room that one had to walk through to reach my room. This was the only way for me to access the rest of the house from inside my room. For a while, one of my childhood friends lived with us and shared my room. It was during this time, for the duration of about a week, that I would wake up at night with the terrifying sounds of slow, heavy footsteps and deep, guttural growling and breathing, moving up and down this front porch room outside my bedroom door. Being 9 years old, I was way too terrified to get up and investigate, and whenever I woke my friend to ask her if she heard the noise, it seemed like it didn't really disturb or faze her. She would get annoyed with me for waking her and just go back to bed. I spent nights, wide awake, listening to this terrifying creature walking around outside my bedroom, with no way of reaching my parents' room without moving through the room that the sounds were coming from. Eventually I learned to sleep with my head under the pillow to drown out the noise, and the sound stopped happening. When I think about it, I still get chills down my spine, and the very real feeling of petrifying fear curdles in my stomach. Many years later, I moved away to live in a boarding school for high school. The girls' dormitories were situated along the 2 long corridors of a 3-story building, on the 2nd and 3rd floors. Nothing remarkable happened to me during this time. However, years later I spoke to a friend who was my age and went to the same boarding school as me. Somehow the conversation turned to inexplicable paranormal experiences, and she proceeded to describe something that happened to her during her time at the boarding school. For the duration of about a week, something would walk up and down the corridor outside her bedroom on the 2nd floor, situated in the middle of the corridor. She would hear guttural breathing and growling sounds and slow, heavy footsteps. When she woke her roommates to ask if they'd heard the noise, it was like they were not disturbed and paid no heed and just went back to sleep. When she tried to open her door to look outside, something started violently pulling on the door handle from the corridor side. Never before had I shared my childhood experience with this friend, and when she described what had happened to her, I felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice over me, having had a very similar experience as a child. I then shared my experience with her, and as you can imagine, we were both quite freaked out to discover that we had such a similar inexplicable encounter. Years later, my youngest sister was sent to the same boarding school for the first year of high school. She had since moved to another school and finished her studies there. Recently, we were hanging out when the conversation turned to inexplicable paranormal experiences. I remembered about the shared experience between me and my friend but opted not to talk about it, since it was so scary and unbelievable, and didn't really want to freak my baby sister out. It was at this point that she started describing something that had happened to her during her time at boarding school. For a week or two, she would wake up and hear something walking around outside her bedroom door. There would be heavy, slow footsteps, and whatever it was made these deep, heavy, guttural breathing sounds. It would walk up and down the corridor throughout the night, and when she woke her roommates to alert them to the sound, they would pay it no mind and go back to sleep. When she described the experience, I went completely cold and felt completely sick. For the second time in my life, someone I knew had described the exact same experience to me that I had as a child, and this time it was my very own sibling. The craziest part is that she stayed in the exact same room that my friend stayed in when she had the experience. I have no way to even begin to make sense of this. I've searched online to no avail, and I've tried to see if there is anyone else out there who has experienced this. The closest thing that my searches have brought up is the term shadow people. So here I am, hoping to find some information, hoping to find others who have shared this experience or something similar, who could help shed some light on what this could mean. I'm not sure if this will yield anything, but I sure would appreciate anyone who has any information to reach out. Thank you. My great-grandmother opened a portal to hell and cursed all the women in my family. This story makes me so nervous to tell. I feel like I'm exposing darkness every time I speak about it. My grandmother invited possibly the devil himself into her home and brought a curse onto all of the females in our family after her. I have always wondered if this is the reason for all of the misfortune in my life, or why in every home I've lived in something has followed. Let me start from the beginning of the story. All of what I am about to tell are accounts of my mother and the daughters of my great-grandmother, who are my grandmother, my mom's mom, and her sister, my great-aunt. For as long as my grandma and aunt could remember, my great-grandma had a crystal ball, a Ouija board, and a pendulum all on her den table. She was a bruja, which in Spanish. She would hold seances, and pregnant women would come to her to determine the sex of their babies. Over 100 pregnant women came to her for this service. Out of those 100, she was never wrong. They all had what she said they would, and she charged $2 for this. The year is 1967. My grandmother was 14, and my great-auntie was 13. They were wild girls who liked to go out with boys, skip school, and come home late after partying. Throughout the years my great-aunt, who was the main target of my great-grandmother's mischief, experienced several strange phenomena linked to my great-grandmother, from a white veil coming down from the sky and almost suffocating her after great-grandma found out she lost her virginity, to a black coffin appearing on my great-grandmother's porch when my great-grandmother got mad at my aunt for not answering the phone for her. There are so many other strange things, but those were very odd and unexplainable. However, none of these small accounts would compare to the night when my great-grandmother went from doing a little magic to fully inviting darkness itself into her home. One summer night in 1967, my grandmother and great-aunt came home at 2 a.m. drunk and loudly giggling and stumbling into the home. When coming in, my great-grandmother was sitting in her den waiting for them. She was furious, but they laughed and told her just to go back to bed and to get over it. Outraged and feeling like she had no other way of controlling her daughters, she fell to her knees and began praying out loud to the devil himself for him to teach her daughters a lesson and make them behave. They didn't take her seriously, mocking her as they stumbled to the bedroom they shared and began changing into their nightdresses and getting into their side-by-side beds. Quickly falling asleep, 3 a.m. approached. About an hour went by, and my great-aunt began hearing my great-grandmother's brother, who lived with them, coming down the hall, which was odd because his bedroom was on the other side of the house and there was no reason for him to be in the hallway. She knew it was him because he suffered from a stroke, and one of his legs dragged behind him. So she heard him coming, a footstep and a drag over and over until it was outside their open bedroom door. Lying on her side with her back to the door, she called out in Spanish, "Tio, what's wrong? Do you need something?" No response. As she tries to turn around and sit up, she realizes she can't move. A sense of pure evil fills the pitch-black room. Panicking now, she suffers for over 30 minutes, paralyzed as she feels someone standing right behind her, fully knowing this wasn't her Tio, it was something malicious. She began to feel her cover slowly pull off of her body, and her nightgown began to be pulled up, stopping at her shoulders. A quick slap to her back and an immense burning pain. She jolted to life and is able to move again, bursting into tears as she jumps out of bed. My great-aunt, now in hysterics, starts trying to wake my sleeping grandma next to her. She wakes and instantly starts freaking out and uncontrollably crying as well. The whole time this was happening to my great-aunt, my grandmother was having a dream that she died and went to hell, in her dream, which was only about an hour. She spent years in hell suffering. They held each other tightly, but my great-aunt's back was hurting her so bad. After telling her sister of her experience, she shows her back to my grandma, and on her back was a burn-like lesion in the shape of a goat hoof, with 3 distinct finger-like marks. As if they couldn't be more traumatized by the experiences they both had, that mark was all the validation that this was real. Calming down now, my great-grandmother all of a sudden is at their bedroom door, startling them with a loud, menacing laugh. She then spoke the craziest thing. She said, "Oh, my poor girls, did something scare you?" After that day the house never felt the same, even if you had all the windows open or all the lights on, it felt dark. Doors would slam, locks would flick back and forth, kitchen drawers would open, and silverware would fly out. Even late at night the piano would play by itself. The house began to rot and fall apart. It stayed in the family until recently, when my great-aunt, who inherited the house after my great-grandmother passed away, fixed it up and sold it to someone unknowing of all this. My great-aunt didn't want to own the house, much less live in it, knowing what was there and the events that took place. I mean, how can she forget? She has a hoof-shaped scar on her back to this very day. You see, it should have ended with my great-aunt and my grandmother, but then she prayed to whatever it was that answered her. She asked for it to teach her daughters a lesson. That means every daughter in our family after her is included. We have all had terrible relationships with our mothers, and unexplainable things happen to us, from bad luck to paranormal activity. So if you move to the center of New Mexico, be careful. Because you might be moving into a home with an over 40-year-old curse and a portal. Help, please help. I can't remember anything from my childhood, apart from the thing that would visit me at night. I can't remember when it started, but it was the same thing each night. It starts in a dream state. I look down at a woman walking in the woods that resides behind my house from a bird's eye point of view. As if I were part of the sky. Staring at her from above the clouds, all I could see was the top of her head. Every step she took, my view became closer, 1 inch at a time, closer and closer, almost as if I was zoning in on her. It felt like forever. Until she reached the end of the woods. By this point I was hovering over her head, and I could see that she was barefoot as she began to walk on the footpath to my house. As she begins on the footpath, my point of view changes. I was following behind her all the way into my street. Until she reaches my door. Then my view switches once again, this time to point of view as if I'm seeing through her eyes. As she enters my bedroom and walks up the stairs towards my bedroom. It feels as if I'm living as a back passenger in her brain, and all there is a surging, earth-shattering hatred. Still to this day I haven't felt something as aggressively powerful as that. As she opens my door, I see myself sleeping as a child in my bed, and that's when the dream states end, but not the absolute horror. I open my eyes to find myself relieved. It was just a dream. And every time I couldn't be any more ducking wrong. I saw it. Staring at me. I can't even bring myself to say this thing looked like a woman. It was something evil trapped inside a vessel that tries to mimic a woman. It was pure white with hard skin, which I still can't describe accurately, but if I had to, the closest thing would be hardened and cracked white clay. Its eyes were large but closely resembled human eyes but were glistening, cloudy, and bloodshot, like they hurt, as if the solid exterior of its face was cemented too closely around its eyes, forcing them open. Then the hair hung draped and ragged, mousy and lifeless. But to top it off, ruby red lipstick was smeared. It wanted to hurt me, it seethed with rage and then would open its mouth to reveal its teeth in a malicious and threatening smirk. Its teeth were like needles. It smiled as if it knew I was terrified and it thrived from it, then the smile dropped and it scuttled towards me on all fours. I screamed the house down every time, and my mother burst the door down, and within a blink, it's gone. This happened every night. My mum tried all options, sedating me to stop what she thought were night terrors and seeing doctors and school counselors, but no matter what happened, I'd wake up at the same time every night screaming. My neighbors called the police multiple times, as I had woken them up. My mother tried to keep from making it a big deal in hopes that it would fizzle out, but of course she spoke to family. And my grandmother picked me up and insisted I stay the night with her. My hair was falling out roughly around 8 years old. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I had no friends, I had no appetite, and I was withering away, skin and bone. My grandmother didn't say anything, but she made me sit at the kitchen table. She looked at me and sighed, brought me soup, and put her hand on top of mine. There was a thick air, it felt like it was hard to talk. But all I can remember is her hesitantly saying, I used to call it sore eyes. I didn't look at her, but I know exactly what she meant. She then continued to say, don't give it anything to smile about, it's only made from mud and worms. Don't be scared of the teeth, needles snap easily. She then brought out a ceramic vase literally full of worms and dirt, took me to the back garden, and made me smash it down onto the cement, where it shattered. My grandmother looked at me and said, it breaks the same way. I asked if I was supposed to physically try and smash the thing that visits me the same way. She told me no, and at first I was confused. She said, as long as you don't let it smile, it will break the same way the needles sit too tightly in its mouth, and its eyes will become too swollen and break like the vase. I asked how to do that and not let it smile, and she told me, you don't have to worry about that now. For the first time I went to sleep in my grandmother's house feeling safe. Once again I slipped into the dream and began the journey towards myself, following the thing. As usual, I opened my eyes to see it standing there staring. Knowing how easily it would break made it seem weak, it kept attempting to lunge at me, and I stared back expressionless, with no fear whatsoever. I can remember my childlike voice echoing in the room as if it bounced off the high ceilings of the room. I'm not scared of you anymore. It grunted and left my room on all fours but not moving humanly. My grandmother then came into my room, took me downstairs, and made me drink a pint of warm goat's milk with cinnamon even though I thought it was gross. She kissed me, and no one ever spoke about it again. I'm 20 now, have moved cities, and have been in a relationship for 3 years. We have a cat and a dog. I have the most tight-knit group of friends, honestly, I couldn't be happier. At 14, I spoke to a shrink about what would come to me as a child. She thought it was possibly stress-induced night terror/paralysis and that my grandmother had just heard the details from my mother and decided to take a more cathartic approach, and it worked. After that, I never thought about it again and never spoke to my partner or friends about it. It was so far back in my memory. As it had been 12 years since it last visited me, but 2 weeks ago it started again. The dream, then opened my eyes to see it. It was crouched down this time, though, almost in a position that sprinters take before they race, like a lunge-type pose. I wasn't scared. I remember the ceramic vase smashing with the dirt and worms. And I once again said, I'm not scared of you. But it smiled, bigger than I remember it. It broke into a deep grunting giggle perched at the foot of my bed. It spoke to me. Only a few words, but it had never done anything like this before back when I was a child. I know, not just yet. And like it used to, it completely vanished. I woke up that morning from a phone call from my mother to tell me my grandmother had passed away last night. I'm devastated and still grieving. After the funeral, my family left me and my mother the honor of clearing out her house. On the floor was soiled goat's milk, with the empty carton on the countertop and cinnamon spilled everywhere. She had already put her things into boxes as if she were preparing for her own death, although there was no indication of suicide. In the box, she left me her rings and jewelry, an expensive antique jewelry box that I admired as a child. Books, genuine silver frames she was gifted at her wedding, and a lot of cash. But she left a white ceramic vase. With dirt and dried worms in a zip-locked bag. She left a note inside the jewelry box, in a silk pole tie bag. Stronger does not mean unbreakable. The tauntings from this thing have been relentless ever since. Someone please help me. Craziest night of my life. Hi, to put some preface on this story before I get into it. I am a Division I football player that plays offensive line for those that don't know what that is. I'm basically saying I'm a big dude currently about 6 feet 5 inches and 300 pounds, basically saying I haven't really been scared of animals or people where I live just because I'm genuinely just bigger than them. Now it was a late night after my high school basketball team at the time had made the playoffs. I was currently on the phone with my girlfriend at the time as I was pulling into my country neighborhood in a small town in Alabama. It was around 12:30 or 1 a.m., and as I was pulling into the neighborhood, I saw this woman with long black hair wearing a Civil War period dress. It wasn't very weird for me to see random kids around my neighborhood because I lived near a foster home. What freaked me out at first was that it was January or February, and at this late at night, it was freezing. To pull into my neighborhood, I had to drive past her. I slowly went about 3 p.m. past this woman and really didn't know what to do. As I passed, she was still staring at the ground. As I checked my rearview mirror, her head snapped up, and I saw an extremely evil-looking face. I hung up the phone and was going 65 to my house. As I mentioned, I am a big dude. When I arrived at my house, I sprinted up my porch stairs and into my room. Me being my size woke everyone in my house up. My dad enters my room to check on me, and I tell him everything that's happened. He asked if I was on anything, and I told him, of course I'm not. He told me to get some sleep, and I, of course, couldn't sleep. It popped in my mind. I had a Latina neighbor that I was very close with who has long jet black hair. Instantly I snapped her on Snapchat, saying, "That was a good prank, and you got me." She said she wasn't even in the state and didn't know what I was talking about. She sent me her location on the Snap map, showing me that she was in Baltimore. That was it. There was no chance I was getting any sleep that night. I hopped on Xbox to tell all my friends about the events that just occurred. Of course they didn't believe me, saying I was joking, and I told them how serious I was. At the end of the Xbox session, it was around 4 a.m. I had gotten off and was going to try to sleep. I went to my bedroom, and as I was walking past the blinds, there she was standing there in the one street light in my neighborhood. I slammed the curtains shut and peeked again, and she was gone. I have no idea what happened or what was going on that night. My dad and little brother have claimed to see the same woman years later in their own different stories. So if you have any questions or any ideas about what was going on, let me know. Confusing, terrifying shadow being encounter. I had something crazy happen to me not too long ago. I decided I would like to share it because I think you all would have a unique perspective. This experience happened around the middle of June 2020 and is one of the craziest things that's ever happened to me. I am not one to go looking for the paranormal. I do find it interesting and listen to a few podcasts, like Mysterious Universe, The Grimerica Show, and others. But it's not something I want to invite into my life. I just want to be prepared if it shows up, you know. I'd rather have the knowledge and not need it than need it and not have it. But the more you look into phenomena, the more it seems to look back at you, I guess. This is the most tangible paranormal thing I've ever experienced. I mean, I've seen weird lights in the sky and other weird stuff out here in the boonies in the Pacific Northwest. I'm 34 years old from Granite Falls, Washington, but this was by far the most visceral. First 3 important details. 1. I live in a travel trailer while I'm working on building my house on my property. The TV sits in the back near the couch, facing the front of the trailer. The bedroom is in the front, and the bathroom is in the middle. 2. My dog lives in the trailer with me. His name is Huck. He is a good guard dog and a good boy. 3. I use my Xbox One with an HDMI connection through my soundbar to my TV. Okay, so I had been watching TV on my Xbox around 9:30 to 10. And I got bored with it, so I decided to play some video games. I opened one up and let it get to the loading screen, which is almost all white. I don't have any lights on in my trailer because I can see by the light of the TV. While the game was loading, I went into the bathroom to take a leak. I'm standing there in the dark, and I can still see because the light from the TV is reflecting off the mirror in the bathroom. As I'm standing there using the bathroom, I can see my shadow in the reflection of the varnish on the cabinets above my toilet. And there is a horizontal white line with a kind of starburst pattern where the TV is reflecting as well. As I watch the horizontal white lines disappear, it feels as if someone is standing right behind me. I can feel someone or something right there. It's not even 2 feet behind me. Every single hair on my body was on end. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't sense malice or ill intent, I just sensed power, extreme power. It felt like when you are somewhere and you see someone, and you just know somehow not to mess with that person. That's the vibe I got. This felt powerful to the point where I knew that it could take me out. So without turning around, I asked, "Who or what are you, and what do you want?" And I heard nothing back. Just felt the presence there, not moving. I had finished using the bathroom and put myself back in my pants by then, but hadn't turned around. In my head I was thinking, if this is how I go, I want to at least see it coming. I'm going to face it. As soon as I started turning around, my sound bar and my TV turned itself off and everything went black. I felt a cold breeze go past me toward the TV, and then the soundbar turned back on by itself, bringing back the light. There was no one there, but the room felt weird. I guess charged would be the right word. Through all of this, my dog never barked, growled, or even woke up. I have no idea what to make of this. I feel like I observed an observer, I guess. It felt like I was an ant in an ant farm and the human was checking in on me. That's how powerful it felt. If I had to put a label on the feeling I was reading off of it, that feeling would be curiosity. I was so scared in the moment I didn't pick up on that. Only after thinking about it later did I come to that conclusion. The hair on the back of my neck and arms is standing up right now just writing this down and reliving it. One good thing to come from this is I learned something about myself. When faced with what is possibly death, there is nothing I can do. If I am powerless to stop it. I faced it. I faced the most fear I had ever felt up until that point in my life, and I didn't freeze. I didn't cower and cry. I didn't try to run away. I faced it. That's a good thing to know about yourself. How you would react to those situations. So who knows? Maybe that's what it was trying to teach me. So yeah, any thoughts or ideas on what you think that thing was would be greatly appreciated. I don't really have anyone to talk about weird stuff like this with. My crazy paranormal experiences, true. My apartment is haunted. Here are all encounters I have had in my apartment. All true stories. 1. The cabinet. One day during the summer I was in the living room with my 3 cats, and I only thought 2 of them were with me. Then I heard a cabinet close in my mom's bathroom. I was so sure it was one of my cats that I went into my mom's room/bathroom saying, "Aw. Which cat is playing over here?" Because my cats have accidentally opened and closed the cabinets before when playing, but when I looked around none of my cats were there. And when I checked back in the living room, my other cat was sleeping under the chair I was sitting on before. 2. The ghost girl. One night when I was laying in bed on my phone, with my door cracked so my cats could get in and out, I saw something at my door out of the corner of my eye. I saw a little girl, whose night was right below the door noob, with long black hair, and a white dress/nightgown, staring at me. But when I actually looked, she disappeared. 3. The hand. First off, we have a hallway that leads to our front door that you can see from the living room. So I was sitting on one of the chairs in our living room, when I saw a big hand go around the corner of the hallway. And the hand was about 5.5 feet up, but when I turned that way and looked where I saw the hand, there was nothing. 4. The black demon/man. This is my most memorable and crazy experience. So we have a shoe area by the front door hallway, that I talked about in the last one, and I was sitting in the same chair from the living room when I saw something again. In the corner of my eyes I saw a tall figure about 6 feet 7 inches, who was all black and was kinda hazy just standing, facing me, about 3 feet away from the shoe area. But when I look, of course, it was gone. But me and my mom hung up Harry Potter candle in that same area/hallway for Halloween. And guess what happened? In the same exact spot a candle that we hung up, kept turning on by itself. And you might think it's a glitch, but all of a sudden it just stopped working. And it was a new battery which we had just got from the store. So my mom replaced the battery. And what do you know, it started happening again. So me and my mom just took the battery out and haven't put it back in. And when it was in and all the candles were on, that one would sometimes be the only one who wasn't. 5. My ghost cat. This one has been happening all the time, but we have a ghost cat. We have 3 cats/kittens. Biscuit, who is our first on and is orange, Gravy, who is siblings with our 3rd cat and is gray, and Honey, who is orange with white paws and chest and siblings with Gravy. So what has been happening is I have been seeing a cat walk or move in the corner of my eye bit when I turn to see who it is and to pet it, there's nothing there. 6. The noises. So recently me and my mom have been hearing noises on our roof, like somebody walking or moving, but the thing is, we live on the 3rd floor. So my theory is, there is something maybe on our ceiling that runs and does stuff, or maybe even lives on our ceiling/roof. But I'm not too sure about this one. My mom doesn't believe me about really any of this stuff, but I do. Ring/grudge apparition. As a child, I experienced several paranormal encounters that I considered significant, 2 of which involved a black-eyed child resembling the girl from The Ring or The Grudge, but with bangs and an appearance identical to a friend from elementary school, except she was pale white with black eyes. The first time I saw her, She was about 50 yards away in the rearview mirror while my dad was driving me away. The second time she was in my room as I went to get something, on her knees on the opposite side of my bed. Anyway, I never paid much attention to it and am not saying the next encounter was the same entity or related, but I have started wondering if they are. I am certain that this encounter is real. It was almost 3 years ago, at 5 to 6 a.m. I was being nocturnal at the time, and I and my girlfriend were getting ready to go to sleep, but I went to the kitchen to get a snack as she followed. I wasn't clear what I was doing, so she asked me, "What are you doing?" Then she said, "WTF," and I spun around right as she flicked on the light in the hallway that was right above her. Immediately after she turned it on, just in time for me to see as I just turned around, the light bulb exploded, and a skinny figure resembling the ring girl appeared, only very tall, maybe 6 inches or something, and her body was only a few inches wide. It disappeared with the flash of light from the exploding light bulb, leaving me and my girlfriend speechless. She said that she exclaimed WTF because she saw a white mist beside her, which is also why she turned on the light. It's the realest experience I have had yet, and it's the most chilling. I and that GF broke up now, but the whole 2 years I was with her, creepy phenomena happened constantly, from the one I just mentioned to us hearing voices, rhythmic tapping on windows, apparitions, dogs growling at nothing, and one time I heard stomping running up to me from behind despite being alone, but nothing like the skinny lightbulb figure. The most notable other experiences were when we heard mumbling outside our bedroom door but were alone in the house, when I was alone going to sleep and saw a shadow figure walking parallel to my bed, us talking about turning the bedroom light on, only for it to turn on by itself right as we mentioned it, and items being moved and lost randomly, sometimes at random appearing in the freezer of all places. My dog at the time was pretty quiet unless he could physically see a person walking outside or something, but my GF said that as I was at work, he would often growl at the hallway, hair standing up as well. I never had him do that the whole 15 years I had him. Most of our experiences occurred in the same house, but they were more intense for her, particularly when I was at work and she was alone there. There were also times in 2 other houses that she claimed to see someone lying beside her, facing her, despite being alone. I will also mention I never experienced things so real, even in that house, until I got with her, and everything ceased when we broke up. Not many things have happened since, and it's been a year. Any thoughts? Was my ex haunted? Is the ring girl or figures like her from folklore? I summoned a demon nun when I was 14 years old. For some backstory, my mom and her sister grew up across the field from 2 boys. We live in a small city in Montana, so they grew up playing with chickens and swimming in the river. My mom went on to have my little sister, N, and me, F, and one of the boys had twins, J and B. The twins' grandparents still live across the field from my grandma, so we grew up with each other, spending hours and hours together outside in the fields or down by the river when they'd come visit each summer. Now, I've always had a spooky soul, so when I saw a Ouija board at a local oddities shop, my wheels started turning. At the time, I was probably 14 or 15, and my sister was 11ish. For reference, the twins are my age. Being broke high schoolers, we decided not to purchase the Ouija board but to, well, make our own. We returned to their grandparents' house. Immediately fetched some card stock, markers, and a little bit of scotch tape. Before our silly teenage brains could process the weight of what we were doing, the board was made. We justified making it with the following sentiment: they say not to do it in your house, but none of us technically lived in their grandparents' house, so it should be fine, right? We got some salt from upstairs to make a salt ring, which we painstakingly laid out on a towel so we didn't get any in the basement carpet. None of us are very religious, I'd say spiritual at most, so we googled a protection prayer, and Jay read it aloud. And just like that, the 4 of us put a finger on our DIY planchette, and we were off. I honestly don't remember much about what happened in the basement aside from talking to a few people, the first 2 of whom identified themselves with initials instead of full names, and a woman whose name I can't seem to recall. They were nice enough, I guess, but all 3 of them warned about some sort of darker energy on the premises. Like I said, I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I remember we heard a noise and got a little scared. We decided that we were done doing it in the basement after that. Being the silly young people we were, we got freaked out and decided to pause for a little bit. We always made sure to say goodbye, but we were really creeped out by this darker entity. The way the other spirits talked about it made it almost seem like it was controlling them or had them trapped. We took a break, but something about the board kept calling us back. Later, we went out into the backyard. It was a beautiful sunny day, but we were shrouded by the shadow cast by the house. Against my little sister's better judgment, which, honestly, we should have listened to, We got the board back out, and before we knew it, we had contacted something. She said her name was Susan, and eventually we found out that she was a nun. We asked where she'd come from, and she said Sydney. We weren't sure if this meant Sydney, Australia, but then B chimed in, "Wait, there's a town in Montana called Sydney." We asked if that was what she meant, and she confirmed. This is where things take a turn. We ask her if she's the evil spirit that the other spirits had mentioned. Regretfully, she was. And we started to get scared. My sister wanted nothing but to be done, but my strong-headed friends and I kept pushing it further and further. We started asking about her life, and I think we asked how she passed away. All of which you're not supposed to do. Eventually, one of us asked where she worked, or something related to that, and she spelled out a bunch of random letters. Confused, we tried again. Same thing. Weird string of letters that looked a little too much like a real word to dismiss. So at this point, we're freaked out and ready to be done. We said goodbye immediately and flipped the Ouija board over, too frightened to even look at the thing. While it was still fresh in my mind, I quickly opened the browser on the old Samsung my dad had given me at the start of the pandemic. I typed in the letters and hit send. My skin erupted into goosebumps. Somehow, in a way that defies logic, the letters turned out to be the name of a church in Norway. Remember how she had said she was a nun? And how would any of us, 3 high school freshmen and a 6th grader, know the name of a Norwegian church? It's possible that my friends were pranking us, but I've never seen them look so scared, and I've known them since I was 3 years old. So my friends and I are done by this point. My little sister is white as a ghost. We say goodbye, forbid anything from following us, and promptly burn the Ouija board. We didn't know that you weren't supposed to do this until afterward, but I digress. It's been 5 years since then, and thankfully, nothing seems to have followed us, but that date taught me a lesson that I'll never forget. You never know what you're dealing with. Who knows what's on the other side of the veil? And who knows who, or what, is trying to get onto our side? And one more thing. It could have just been a scam call, but I recently got a phone call from an unknown number from Sydney, Montana. Normally I don't answer spam calls unless it's to do so in a Russian accent to mess with them, but for some reason, I answered this one. There was nothing on the other line. A little girl lives in my parents' house. Hey, everyone. In 2004 my mom and I moved into my stepdad's house. Some of the craziest, most unbelievable things have happened over the years, and as I was recalling some events to my husband, I realized I had forgotten some of them, probably out of fear. I thought this would be the best place to remember them all. I'll answer any questions you may have. Also, sorry this is so long. The first thing I can remember happening is the freezer door. It was a super innocent event, and we didn't think anything of it at the time. We had gone grocery shopping, and after putting the frozen foods in the freezer, the door would close just fine, but once you turned your back, it was wide open again. This happened time and time again throughout the rest of the night. We checked multiple times to ensure that a box or something wasn't in the way of the suction. There was no reason for it to open by itself. 2. While watching TV in the living room, the channel would change, constantly. Not up a channel or down a channel, either. For example, if I were in the 40s, it would go to channel 3 or 5. 3. I got a new bed, one of the ones where there are drawers along the bottom of it. 3 on each side. Because my bedroom was so little, I had the bed pushed up against a wall, meaning that 3 of the 6 drawers were inaccessible. I was in the 4th or 5th grade at the time, aka too weak and little to move the bed myself. Random items of my mom started disappearing. One of her slippers, a couple CDs, and some other things I can't remember. We thought it was my stepbrother playing a dumb prank. One day we decided to rearrange my room, and after the bed was moved, for some reason, we opened up the middle drawer on the inaccessible side, and everything was in there. The slippers, CDs, and the strangest thing we found was a Ziploc bag of old, used wax crayons that I never owned. 4. I guess the next thing we noticed was the ceiling fan. My parents had a sailor theme in the living room, and attached to the ceiling fan chain was a lighthouse, which would sometimes swing a little if the fan were on high. But would swing around as if someone flicked it when the fan wasn't on. 5. My mom, my friend, and I were standing in the living room. We were talking about the swinging chain of the lighthouse ceiling fan, and I was applying chapstick, which I then put on the coffee table. The moment I put it down, I realized I should have put it in my pocket, but it was missing off the table. I said out loud, "Where's my chapstick?" And I shit you not, swear on everything, it appeared in mid-air, above the coffee table, and fell straight down, as if someone was holding it and dropped it. We all ran out of the room, and none of us really talk about it to this day. 6. My mom approached me one morning and told me not to lie to her and that she wouldn't be mad, just tell the truth. Once she realized that I had no idea what she was referring to, she explained that the night before, she had woken up to hear a little girl's voice humming in her ear, as if the girl were standing next to the bed. My mom checked the entire house, including my room, to make sure it wasn't me. I didn't believe her at all. Until years later, while babysitting my grandmother, who then lived with them while they were away, I slept in my mom's bed and awoke to a little girl humming in my ear. It was the scariest moment of my entire life. I was numb from fear, and I think I passed out from it, because I don't remember falling back asleep. I remember being terrified, feeling every hair on my body standing straight up, and then, nothing, morning. I haven't told anybody this happened. 7. One night, my mom was cooking in the kitchen down the hall, and I was in my room. I heard the front door open and my dog jump around, greeting someone. I assumed it was my stepdad and peered down the hall. I saw a man in overalls and a blue knit hat walking. No sooner than he turned the corner, my mom came running down the hallway towards me, pale white, crying that she felt someone come behind her and say hi in her ear, but she was alone in the kitchen. We both ran to the living room, realized the driveway was empty, and waited in the empty driveway until my stepdad actually came home. To this day, we don't know who the man was that came into our home. My many encounters. In my family, well, to be more specific, my grandmother and my sister have had lots of paranormal encounters. Whether that be in dreams, looking at pictures, or person to spirit. I will tell the stories that my family gave me in third person and my own in first. Many people in my family have had at least one story. Story 1. This story was a few years back. It's not my personal experience, it's my little cousin's. B was 2 years old when she had her first encounter with the UN living. Her parents weren't the most fortunate, and they moved from duplex to duplex. But her parents had finally found a home to live in. It was a mobile home, not much was known about its past. They just signed some paperwork, got the keys, and moved in. They started getting comfortable in their newly found home. It was peaceful. Up until B started talking to something. When her parents asked, she would say, "I'm talking to my friend Bella." B didn't know anyone named Bella. Now you're probably thinking, kids have wild imaginations. B was only 2 and had never shown signs of having a big imagination. Eventually it just became a thing for B to talk to her friend. Until B would complain to her parents that Bella was choking her. That is when B's parents began to become a little concerned and went to B's grandmother for help. Her grandmother was very spiritual and had lots of experience with the dead. Her grandmother set up a ghost box in the house and started communicating with the spirits. And once they started communicating, they got some answers. Then B's father got mysterious scratches that would appear out of nowhere, and B would curl up into a ball in the middle of the floor, which was very unusual. She was normally the happiest girl in the world. Now they were getting answers on the ghost box. Some of the responses from the ghost box included phrases like fallen angel, ha 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 ha, STFU, and Michigan. He even said the boy next door ended him. After all the dangerous encounters, they ended up moving. B was happy once again. Story 2, my own story. I was around 4, and my parents had recently had a divorce. I would stay at my grandma's house, non-spiritual grandma, where my father lived. When I was young my imagination was not big. And I had never watched scary movies. Not even Goosebumps, but I had developed realistic nightmares of a man around 6'2" who would stand over me and taunt me, saying he ended certain family members, that he was going to kill me, and that he hurt my pets. Eventually I was terrified of sleeping and started sleeping in my grandma's room. Not even that was safe, though, because randomly in the middle of the night I would see a crying lady in a long blue dress with black hair run out of my grandma's bathroom screaming. After I saw her, I'd scream and cry, and my grandma would wake up. Since I moved, I haven't seen them. Story 3. I was at a family reunion. We went to a huge church school every family reunion. It was 3 stories, and it had little windows that peered into the lower floors on the upper levels. I, my sister, and a few of my cousins decided to sneak upstairs, where we weren't allowed to be, and explore. We found a music room where we could hear something so cliché. A piano was playing some weird song. When we went in, a boy was playing it. It was weird because no students or staff were allowed on school grounds at the time. He ran out of the room, so we chased him down a hall. Then he was gone. There was nowhere for him to go down that hall. He just kinda disappeared? We never found anything about him. Story 4, this is one of my grandmas. When Cam was young, she had a child that she named Misha. After she had Misha, Cam started having violent night terrors about a baby around the age of 2 that was dead. It had water running out of its mouth and was blue. She would wake up screaming, and her husband would have to comfort her. She would scream, "Misha was dead." I saw it. She kept Misha away from any open water from that day on but continued to have the same night terror. Well, Misha grew up into an adult and had 2 kids she named Kinley and Ava. By that point Cam's nightmares had calmed down, she felt better knowing Misha was safe. Until one day Misha brought her children and sisters to the lake for a beach day. Kinley was 6 and Ava was 3. Misha was making snacks when she realized where's Ava. She looked around the beach and felt a sharp pain in her chest. Then she went into shock. Ava was dragged back to the shore by 2 12-year-old girls. Misha wasn't able to comprehend what was happening. Until everything snapped and she did CPR. Kinley watched the whole thing, until Misha's sister went to distract her. Cam was called, and Ava was air flighted to the hospital. Cam saw Ava. Ava looked exactly like the child in her dream. "Ava is me. Ha ha ha, don't worry, I'm not dead. I was legally dead for a few minutes there but I'm okay now. Just got some brain damage Lamau." After the incident while I was in the hospital, I was talking to my grandma. She told me I said I saw mermaids that tried to help me. But when I described what the mermaids looked like, I described my family members who had passed before I was born and that I have no pictures of. Story 5, I was around the age of 10 or 11, I can't remember. I was living with my mother and her ex. The house was built 100 or something years ago. It was a 2-story mint green house, and it was beautiful. It had a garden and a big backyard, and we kept the original front door as a decoration. It was a bit out of shape but it was still livable and cheap. It had the perfect neighborhood other than a few fresh out of jail weirdos who lived down the road. But it was next to the community park and the police station. I had a room in the attic that was redesigned into 2 rooms. A huge playroom with stairs and a chandelier in my room, which was small with no cooling or heating, and bugs got into my lighting, which made the power in my room go out. But I made it work. I got really comfortable living in my tiny room and decorated it with posters, shelves, a homemade dartboard that I would throw knives at, and a huge old-fashioned dresser that took up most of the space in my room. Well, one day my mom's, at the time, husband got mad at me and took away my door. So I could just peer into the darkness of the huge room outside of mine. It scared me. It was night, and I was on my phone. I heard a noise coming from the other room, so I looked out into the other room, and fingers were wrapped around the door frame. I sat there paralyzed for 10 minutes with tears streaming down my face. Until I started screaming and they went away. And one day when I was sitting on the couch in my living room, my youngest sister ran out of her room crying, saying a monster ran across her room. She was too young to have an imagination like that. And I would hear a small hello whispered into my ear most nights, which made me lose a lot of sleep. At some point I fell into a deep depression that seemed to make everything worse, like the spirits had a hold of me. Me and my sister eventually brought in a ghost box which we could hear a little boy saying "sorry mommy" on. So we did research, and a lady went insane in the house because she had miscarriages, and she ended herself. Most likely in the attic. The demon in my kid sister's closet. At least I think it was a demon. It definitely was malicious, or at the very least not benevolent. So when I was 18, I moved back to live with my mom to help raise my kid sister. My mom was really abusive and neglectful, and I didn't want my sister to suffer the same fate I did living with my mom. My sister loved to read, and she was really into Wicca. So I researched online, found an occult store, and yes, stupidly bought a book on witchcraft and gave it to my kid sister, who wasn't more than 7 at the time. I thought it was just harmless fun. Then the noises started happening. Late in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m. to 3 a.m., everyone in the house would be woken up by a thunderous boom. We'd all get out of our rooms and ask each other, "Did you hear that? What was that?" It didn't happen often, maybe once a week. But it would keep happening. Just suddenly in the middle of the night, boom, and the whole house would shake. We'd all wake up, look around, and find nothing that made the sound. And the more it happened, the more we realized it was coming from my kid sister's room. Specifically, it was coming from her closet. My kid sister told me after she started practicing spells, she started seeing shadows moving in the house. She got scared and threw her witchcraft book into the back of the closet. That's when the noises started happening. Once she told me this, I took that ducking book, and I burned it. We never heard any noises since, and I never bought her another book on witchcraft. A ghost of my great-grandfather. This happened 3 or 4 years ago. In my family, we have a tradition of visiting my great-grandmother in a village very far from the city, about 400 kilometers from it. Despite her advanced age of 92, her mental clarity was unwavering. The house that we stayed at was very old. It survived World War I and World War II. It never felt odd or scary. But our cat absolutely hated it for no apparent reason and would always leave it at night. I and my mother were staying in the biggest room of the house. It had 2 beds in the opposite corners of the room. One of those beds belonged to my great-grandfather, who died many years ago from lung cancer, so I never saw him. The bed itself was very nice and comfortable, but it gave a very uneasy feeling to anyone who slept in it. My aunt once tried to sleep in it but woke up in the middle of the night because of feeling that someone was trying to choke her. The next night she woke up at the exact same time because she had trouble breathing, and she heard the sound of someone breathing heavily under her bed. The craziest part for me is that Grandpa didn't like her. She never stayed in that house again. So, enough backstory. In the summer of 2019, my mother and I were getting ready for sleep. I absolutely hated that bed because I couldn't sleep well in it. So I told her about it, and we decided to switch places. That night my mother woke up to a strange noise. Our grandma would sometimes walk in her sleep, so she decided to listen if she needed any help. But she only heard her snoring and no footsteps. Then she wondered if it was me, because I had a habit of falling asleep on the rug while watching TV late at night. But she heard my breathing from the opposite corner of the room. While she was doing that, the noise that she heard only got louder and closer. It started to resemble very heavy and troubled breathing. At first it was coming from somewhere below the bed, but in 5 minutes or so it was right in her ear. She didn't open her eyes in fear of seeing something. That same night I had a nightmare. In it I saw an old man who sat under a light bulb that was the only source of light. He tried to tell me something. It looked like he was screaming, but the only noise that he made was a strange screeching sound. In the morning while we were having breakfast, we talked about it. We are skeptics, so we tried to find some rational solutions. But when Grandma heard about it, she told us about a similar situation that happened to her. One night she woke up to the same breathing noise coming from under the same bed. She decided to look down. And there she saw my great-grandfather lying next to her bed. She wanted to scream, but he raised a finger to his mouth as if to warn her not to do it. Then he said to her, "It's not your time yet, I will come for you later." We were very scared after that story. But nothing happened for the rest of our stay. Last September we were visiting her again. She told us that she saw him again. But this time he said that they will meet soon. And on October 4th at 10:37 she died. It was my birthday right to the exact time. And I was named after her. That shit still creeps me out. Thank you for reading, and sorry for all the mistakes. English is not my native language. House E13, my dad told us the house we lived in 15 years ago was haunted. Being a cop's kid in India comes with a fair share of creepy and scary incidents and stories, but what my dad told us a few months ago made me question my memories of our childhood home. I and my siblings like to listen to our dad's anecdotes about how he solved impossible murders and the usual cop stories, but what he told us this one night was different. He might have had a drink or two after dinner, but nothing unusual, as we sat in our living space. We were questioning him about some case he solved several years ago, when he was posted as inspector in charge, equivalent to a precinct captain in the US, of a national park region. Cops in India get transferred from one area to another quite frequently, and most decide to move without their families, but my father preferred to keep his family close. About 15 years ago he was transferred to a national park. We also moved there with him. That's most of what I remember, given that I was only 6 years old. I have only happy memories of the place, me and my siblings playing in the garden with our dog, us going on safaris, my time at the local school, etc. Anyways, that night, out of the blue, his tone became a little serious as he talked about the house we lived in. I remember it being like any other government-allotted residence in India. The gardens are larger than the house itself, but the space was more than enough for our family and our dog. He reminded my mom how he moved a few weeks earlier than us to make sure the place was clean and renovated, as it was next to a jungle, but when he reached there, he was shocked at the sight of the place. The previous inspector chose not to live in the residence for some reason, and the place was not maintained. He described the place in great detail. 7-foot-tall shrubs covered the entrance and the front garden. The small pathway to the front door looked like a cave. There were vines everywhere, and God, the rats were the size of small cats. Intrigued, we pressed him more to tell us everything about it. "Nah, you won't be able to sleep tonight if I do." But we were not backing away now. We had a feeling he was making all this up, but we were hooked. We wanted to know more. The house number was 13, nobody wanted to take it. My junior officers told me not to move into that place. But my ego was too big, and honestly, I don't believe in ghosts myself. I remember getting a new nameplate for our house. We lived in Lane E, so originally the house was E13, but my dad got it changed to E12A. I found it somewhat unusual, but as a child, I did not dwell on it extensively. I got the place renovated and cleaned up. It took a couple of weeks. 2 days before you were about to arrive, I decided to sleep in the house. The police barracks were definitely not for me, he continued. My driver and my assistant did not want me to stay alone, but they didn't want to stay in the house either. After a long conversation with them, they agreed to let me sleep in the house only if I let them sleep in the patrol car outside. I was confused and honestly a little pissed off, but whatever helped me get a good night's sleep in my own bed. He paused again. He was trying to talk us out of this little storytelling session, but we were not budging. Whatever, just don't come running into our room tonight if you have a nightmare. He continued hesitantly. I moved my stuff into the house that afternoon and noticed that they had placed the bed in what should have been the living room. When I asked them to move the bed into another room separated from the front door, they straight up denied. That was the last straw. I told them they have to do what I want, or I'll do it myself because this is my residence now. They eventually complied. He took another sip of his whiskey. In the evening the movers left, and I decided to go and check in at the station before calling it a day. Something came up at the station, so I asked a constable to go and switch on the lights at the house. It was like 50 meters away from the station. 2 hours went by, and he didn't come back. We decided to go back and check on him. My mom was not enjoying this conversation at all. Why didn't you tell me this before? She scolded him mockingly. I didn't think much of it, honestly. At this point we couldn't tell if he was just joking or if his claim was true, but we didn't care. Yeah, so we found him passed out in the lobby, but he was a little old, so we thought maybe the heat got to him. He was taken to a doctor. But my assistant and driver were acting weirdly. They did not seem happy and asked me to sleep at the barracks again, and like the last time, I refused. He took a breath and continued, after nightfall I got ready to go to bed, but something seemed a little off. Living close to a national park is spooky enough, but this was different. I brushed it off and lay down in the bed. But a few minutes later, as I stared into the ceiling, I noticed something. The fan. One of its blades was slightly bent, not something you'd spot straight away but like a scoop, as if something pulled it downwards. A lot of strange scenarios played in my mind as to what would have caused it, but the house was abandoned for a few years, so I just figured it could have been a vine or a shrub or something. I did eventually fall asleep. Don't tell me someone hung themselves from that fan, I said, half disgusted, partially excited. Something like that. He smiled slyly. My mom was not impressed, though. I lived in that house alone with the kids for weeks at a time, and you didn't bother to tell me someone ended themselves in the house? What you don't know can't hurt you, can it? He replied smugly. The next day, I decided to ask the two idiots why they preferred spending the night in the patrol car instead of at their homes. They were a little tight-lipped initially, but eventually the history of the house was revealed to me. About 5 years before we moved in, a family lived in the residence. A man, his wife, and her sister. One sister hung herself in the bedroom, and the other burnt herself in the kitchen. After that no one wanted to live in the house. As ghost story buffs, my siblings and I were enjoying every bit of this. I was a little uncomfortable learning all this, but as a cop I have seen much worse. I decided I was going to prove that the house is not haunted. If a family with young kids could stay there, anyone could. God, I can't believe this. You were ready to put your kids in danger for the sake of your reputation? My mom retorted, but to be honest, she was quite intrigued by this. What danger? Ghosts? You don't believe that. The house was amazing, perfect for our kids, and you really enjoyed your time there. He replied. So what happened next? My sister asked. Well, this was the day before you were set to arrive. I decided to sleep alone in the house again. Nothing happened the previous night, so it was okay, I guess. I went to bed a little early. The day was hectic. But around midnight I woke to a sound of faint sobs, almost sing-songy, like a woman was crying but singing at the same time. I decided to check it out. I peeped outside through the front window, and my aides were fast asleep in the patrol car. But the sound was coming from somewhere in the back, near the kitchen. I walked through the living room into the lobby as the voice grew louder. Eventually, I stood outside the kitchen. I made sure to turn all the lights on in the rest of the house while walking towards the kitchen. I looked around in the kitchen, nothing, but I could still hear the voice. It was close. He looked at my mom. Do you remember a small pantry we always kept close? Yeah, the pantry you asked to keep closed. I remember. She replied. I leaned around the doorframe and peeped into it, and well, I saw something below the slab. I don't know how to describe it, but it was a figure, a half-burnt woman, crouched in the tight space. She was sobbing. He paused for a moment. We were all silent as well. It was for a split second, I didn't even realize what I saw until I turned my eyes back into the kitchen. I spun around immediately. It was still there, this figure. Her flesh was burnt, red, black, and shades of purple, her hair was fried, and her head shifted. Her hollow eyes looked straight at me. "Alright, you got us, ooh, we're scared," my brother mocked. "You know I don't lie. Plus you were the one who wanted to know," Dad replied. "So what did you do next?" I asked. "I went numb, quite frankly. I walked back to the bedroom and fell asleep. Left the lights on. Didn't do anything." He shrugged. "What? You saw a ghost and fell asleep?" "Yeah. Maybe it was a dream because you heard the story that day and your mind was playing games," I asserted. "Maybe. Or maybe it was indeed a ghost," my sister countered. "Maybe. You are lying. I saw what I saw, you can believe whatever you want." And BTW, the old man who lived in the house opposite to us was ended by his son for money a few years after we moved out. He said something compelled them to do it. He might have been lying to protect himself, Ike. We still couldn't tell if he was lying. "Wow, that's crazy. Did you see something again while we were there with you?" I asked. "Yeah, I heard the sobbing again a few times. I didn't react or wake up, I eventually got used to it. Shadows here and there. The house help refused to stay with you in the house overnight whenever I was away on operations. Maybe she sensed something too. That's why I got Buddy. Someone suggested I should get a black dog to ward off the spirits. Handling a dog while caring for 3 small kids was difficult, but it was necessary." I looked at my mom. She was a little pissed but not enough. "You seriously had no idea about this?" "I did." She replied. "Do you remember Monica?" Monica was the neighbor who provided you with evening tutoring. Months after we moved out, she called me and told me everything. Your dad asked them not to tell us anything because it would have spooked me out. She looked at Dad accusingly. "It worked out well, didn't it? I hate it when he's smug." Of course, I'm pretty sure these kids were enough to spook the ghosts out themselves. "Now, I'm done with this ghost talk, I'm going to go sleep." Mum walked out to the bedroom. "Anything else you want to tell us?" my sister asked. "Yeah, remember the house we lived in during quarantine? An inspector died in the kitchen due to cardiac arrest in 2018. He took the last sip of his drink and walked away." We all grunted almost in unison. "So, that was the craziest story my dad has ever told us." I believe him. I don't know if what he experienced was real, but I do know that his experience was. We later asked Dad if the house still exists, and we wanted to visit it, but we found out that the house was demolished, as it was unstable after years of abandonment. The current inspector also told us that Dad's successor decided to move in. Apparently he came running out of the house during his first night and never went back there. Which is kind of funny, but I also feel bad for him. Nobody wanted to stay there. Was my childhood house haunted? I'd just like to get this off my chest. My childhood home was really creepy. I moved into the house with my mom and 2 older brothers at the age of 3, and as long as I could remember, it felt like someone was watching me in the house, even when I was alone. This was the feeling you'd get when someone you know who doesn't like you is staring daggers at you. The malice and hatred were palpable in the air. The upstairs hallway felt the worst for some reason, and the floorboards always creaked at night, like footsteps going back and forth. Of course, I complained to my mom, but she said it was the pipes, etc. On top of this, I had a nightmare for years. When I say nightmare singular, I mean it, the same dream at least 1 to 2 times a week. I was running through a stone maze-like structure being chased by an amorphous shadow being in the shape of a tall humanoid. The shadow thing never caught up to me. It was like it wasn't trying to, it just lumbered after me each time, silently following and terrorizing me. When I was 7, my mom fell pregnant with my little brother, and the pregnancy was a little rough on her. My mom swears blind that at the worst moment of her pregnancy, the ghost of her dead friend appeared to her to tell her the pregnancy would all be okay. And it was. After my brother was born, things got worse, though, not for me, you see, but for my mom and brother. My mom often claimed she would wake up unable to move and would see floating lights circling her bedroom. When my little brother was 2 to 3, now sharing a room with me, he would scream and cry for hours, pointing at the linen cupboard in the hall, saying something was watching him from inside. The door to that cupboard had always been a little broken and would never close all the way. At the height of this, my brother would only really sleep if he was in my mom's bed with her, so she let him every now and then. She told me this story. One night she wakes up, and my little brother is standing beside the bed looking at her, and she thinks, oh, he must need the toilet, and asks him. He says nothing in response, So she tells him to get back in the bed and rolls over to see him lying next to her. Freaked out by this, she sits up and watches the boy she thought to be my little brother walk through the bedroom door. The bad dreams had stopped for me by then, but the feeling of unease, like I was watched, continued. The creepy hallway was still creepy, and my brother was still upset by the linen cupboard. We moved out when I was 15 and my mom married again. The new house had none of the feelings of the old one, and no place I have lived since has. For the true believers and skeptics out there, I have rationalized everything in my head, but some things have always bothered me. Bad dreams/feeling watched, had an abusive father, childhood anxiety? The reason my mom was single and raising 4 kids alone. Hallway footsteps, pipes, like Mum said? Brother's fear of the linen cupboard, childhood fear of the unknown? I know, I guess I'm reaching with that one. Mum's encounters, how do I explain that? She has no history of mental illness, she doesn't lie, and if anything, she shares too much. Was my childhood home haunted by some child-hating ghost or something? The little girl. This is a series of very real experiences I've had since my family moved to the Northeast. So it all started when we moved in. It was the day after my 8th birthday. After I unpacked all my clothes and toys, it was time for bed. My 3 siblings were all settled in, and nothing odd had happened yet. I went to sleep that night like normal and astral projected. I used to do it a lot as a child, I don't know how. I went downstairs, and outside the window was a shed that wasn't in the physical realm. I wasn't surprised, and some motion in the kitchen attracted my attention. It was a little girl. She was in a white dress and had curly black hair. Suddenly I was flat on my face and could hardly move. She kept screaming, "It's going to eat me," pointing at the vent on the floor of the kitchen. I looked at her like she was crazy. Then a scaly green hand came out of the vent and pulled her down. After that I sprinted back to my body, and to this day I haven't astral traveled since. A few years passed, and then when I was 10, I saw her again, this time IRL. I went to get something from my mom's room for her, and I stopped at the top of the stairs, right outside the door to her room. I saw something out of the corner of my eye, and I thought it was my sister going to her room, but it wasn't. The little girl looked at me with a smile and somehow switched our perspectives. I'd how to explain it, but I saw myself from her eyes for a second. My mouth and eyes were wide open. We switched back, and she turned and walked through my sister's closed wooden door. I sprinted down the stairs and refused to go back up alone. I didn't see her again until in 9th grade I moved into what used to be my sister's room. She appeared in my dreams, always suspending me in the air and making it impossible for me to control my body. I woke up from one of these dreams to her standing at the foot of my bed, watching me sleep. When I turned on my lamp, she turned into a hazy mist that stayed for a good half hour. I haven't seen her outside of dreams since, and after the last time I saw her, I started learning ways to spiritually protect myself. The craziest part is I asked my sisters about her, and they told me that when they lived in Ohio as kids, she was in their closet. She followed them and attached herself to my middle sister, the one I've been talking about. Our old haunted house. I grew up in the same house for years. I was 4 when we first moved in and 21 when we left. So these are a few stories from my whole family that happened in that home. At first, I would share a small bedroom with my mom, and my dad would sleep in the living room. My aunt and uncle shared the master bedroom, and my brothers both shared a room. My whole family would talk about odd things happening in the house. I think it started with my mom hearing footsteps in the living room. Our house was old, built in 1924. It would easily shake when someone would walk. So my mom would hear these steps in the middle of the night. She originally thought it was my dad, as these steps sounded heavy. Every time she checked, however, he would be sound asleep on his bed. She would also tell my dad how she would feel someone pulling her hair and feet at night. Although she was scared, she would not scream because she did not want to scare me. Another night she was in the living room with my dad watching TV when she heard what sounded like porcelain hitting the back of the cabinet a few times, as if it were falling, and finally hitting the carpet. She thought maybe it was one of the little porcelain dolls she had placed on top of it and decided to check in the morning. When she checked the next morning, nothing was there. One day one of my aunts came to visit the aunt who lived in our home. They were sitting in the living room when they heard someone with heavy footsteps walk up to the front door. They also thought it was my dad and expected him to come walking in any minute, but no one did. They went out to check, but no one was at the door. They didn't hear anyone walk away either. So they brushed it off. Another time, my aunt was home alone cooking in the kitchen when she saw a bright, almost shining, gangster-looking person walk from the living room into my and my mom's bedroom. She chased him, screaming, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" To her surprise, when she went into the bedroom, no one was there. At some point, my dad got my brothers and me a basketball to play with. The first day we had it, we put it outside by my bedroom window. Late at night, my mom heard it bounce. Bounce 1 2 3, bounce 1 2 3. It was in a rhythm. She thought it was us kids playing and was ready to yell at us, but when she looked out the window, no one was there. This happened 3 more times. My mom eventually got sick of it, thinking it was all in her head, and moved the ball to the opposite side of the house next to my aunt's window. The next day, my aunt came to my mom and asked her if we were playing outside her window last night. My mom told her no and asked her why she was asking. Well, my aunt had heard the ball bouncing. My mom asked if it was in a rhythm, and my aunt said yes. My mom popped the ball with a knife and threw it in the trash after that. Now for my brother's stories. One day they were both sitting in their beds, watching TV, when my mom and I came to their room to bring them food. I don't remember this at all, but my mom said their bedroom doorknob had twisted and their door had opened by itself. My brothers thought she was the one who opened it, and she thought they were the ones who did it. They all agreed to disagree, denying what they saw. Late one night my brothers had left their bedroom door open so they had a full view of the bathroom and hallway. One of them woke up for some reason, and he looked at the hallway. That's when he saw a black figure crouched on the floor next to the restroom door. He woke up my other brother, and they both stared at the figure for about a minute or so. The figure stood up and disappeared before their eyes. On another night, they were hanging out with their friends outside. I was with them, and I recall this all happening. They kept pointing at a figure in the backyard. My brother ran in the house and brought out a flashlight, but when he tried to shine it, it would not work. I recall all of us debating on whether or not to go back there and see what it was, but we were all too scared. We called it a night and came inside. Out of curiosity my brother turned the flashlight on, and it was working perfectly fine. We were shocked. I recall we took a trip out to Mexico, and we stayed in my grandma's, mom's mom, house. I was about 8 years old, and I really wanted to see my grandma, dad's mom, so I stayed up. For context, we all slept in the living room of the house. There were a few beds there, so my family of 5 slept there. The beds were pushed right up against the wall. You wouldn't be able to stick your hand in there. That's how tight up against the wall they were. I kept looking at the clock, waiting for daylight so we could walk to grandma's house. It was about 5 a.m. I looked at my mom's head, and I saw a hand come out of where the bed and wall meet. A pitch black hand at her head as if it were aiming to grab her hair. I vividly remember thinking how weird it was to see how black this hand was, you know, when your eyes are adjusted to the night, and everything is somewhat a dark blue color. This hand was solid black, compared to the rest of the blue-hued room. The strangest part was, it turned to me, the palm facing me as if it saw me, and it quickly lowered behind the bed and the wall. I didn't feel any sort of fear, just full-on confusion. How did it fit there? Why was it so black? Eventually my dad woke up, and we left for grandma's. I didn't tell anyone. Now for the finale. We came back from our vacation, all the stories of our home were building up, and everyone was telling my dad what was going on. He denied it for a while, claiming nothing had ever happened to him, so it's not true. Then it happened. My dad woke up to the heavy footsteps in the hallway, right next to where he slept. The next morning he told my mom and agreed this was something paranormal. They went to the church down the street and asked the priest to bless our home. The priest came by that same night, blessed the home with no issue, and that was it. Just like that, everything was over. At some point I told my mom about the hand in Mexico, and boy was she shocked. It's as if I confirmed it for her. To this day she fears the spirit may still be following her around. She freaks out at any mention of a black figure. As for my old home, I later found out an old woman had fallen in the restroom and died, and a gang member was shot and killed in the house. Those were probably the spirits my aunt and brothers saw. I just hope they both found peace. I had a lot of experiences since I was a child, and most helped me grow and develop mentally and spiritually, and I overcame fear. I have never encountered an experience so dreadful or harrowing that I could not handle. However, keep in mind that I am very in tune with my intuition, and the moment something feels off, or I visualize it, or sense it, or hear it, I simply avoid it. Stick around to read because I think it might be intriguing to y'all. Few things I still think about to this day, though not in a scared way. One of them is from a period when I had so much stress and spiritual attacks going on that it was literally making me physically sick. I had multiple sleep paralysis during 1 week's time. I was open to the spirit world 24/7, which is very dangerous, BTW, seeing, smelling, feeling, hearing, and communicating. And most things were benevolent. However, some were still scary at that moment. One night when I had sleep paralysis was when I was sleeping in bed with my mother, We had severe earthquakes in the past few days, and aftershocks were consistent, so it was quite dangerous to sleep alone in another bedroom, as we had the whole emergency exit plan. I woke up in the middle of the night sleeping on a side. Not my ducking backside. Which means these trances are a real deal. I had my back turned to my mother. She had her hand on my arm and shoulder. I woke up to something touching my face and head and arm. First I thought it was her, but I felt entranced and could not move, I could only think. Soon I felt a very strange presence, and I could swear there were 3, not 2, in the room. I heard a spooky female whisper right next to my ear, saying something like, "It is okay, my baby, you are safe. Shh, it is okay, mommy is here," while a long black slim-fingered hand gently touched me and seemed to comfort me. I was so scared, but could not move or speak, so I was like, okay, whatever, I will just ignore it, and it will go away. I could move my eyes, though. As I moved the eyes to the side, I could partially see this dark, slim, black-haired thing that looked like it came straight out of the middle of the dark forest, actually hugging my mother and using her to get to me. She literally moved my hair from my face with her fingers. I am not joking. I could feel her fingers touching my face. The next day my mother told me that she woke up sometimes in the night to taps and touches to her head and hair, and she was convinced it was my grandma, her mother, whose bedroom used to be above hers, who passed just 1 month ago, comforting both of us. I was like, sewer, okay, and I left her believing that she was making her peace. But that shit was not my grandma. I am almost positive it is a hag and a current form of an old witch that really liked my energy and my presence and literally wanted to adopt me. Maybe her daughter died or something, but damn, because I could feel her in my spirit, and she literally saw me as her daughter and wanted to protect me. Even though it was scary, it was not evil in the end. Like she was legit sad and wanted me to be her baby. So I let her for one night. I had dreams after that about a young gypsy witch sleeping under my mother's bed behind a headboard next to a wall. She would crawl from under a bed and walk after me in my dreams, follow me to the bathroom, etc., and would hey me all the time, grabbing my arm when I turned my back, being all hectic and agitated, and talking all the time. "Why don't you want to speak to me? Talk to me. Why do you ignore me? What did I do wrong?" She was genuinely concerned that I did not want to talk. I would tell her to leave me alone, that I don't care, that I already have a mother, and that I am dealing with a lot and simply am not interested in any bonding. Dreams stopped soon after. In the same period, one early morning, pre-dawn, I woke up also paralyzed, again on a side, right on the edge of a bed, and saw a black entity that I could see, feel, and smell. It was legit 3D and smelled nasty. It was like a swamp smell, something very moist, standing next to my bed and touching me, shaking me, and poking me. It was so confused by me, and it seemed like curiosity, not something evil. It probably saw me, and as I was open, it came into my energy space out of curiosity and was trying to figure me out. I relaxed my mind and thought, "Leave me alone, I want to sleep," before falling back asleep. It never happened again. I had many more things happening, but it is more with what you call demons, what you call Satan, actually it is darkness itself, and what you call ghosts, so it is for some other story times. I managed all of those, though, and am very proud of my growth. Nothing is more powerful than our mind, indeed. My ongoing experiences. A few years ago I randomly woke up at 3 a.m. to a man sitting in the corner of my room next to my bed. It was really weird, and I have never experienced anything like it. I could so vividly see his face and his body just sitting there. I just quickly rolled over, turned my light on, and went back to sleep. A few days later, I went to sleep, and I woke up to what felt like I was being slapped in the face, and when I opened my eyes, there was nothing. I kept seeing shadows around my house, and my siblings have heard noises coming from upstairs. Years have gone by, and little things happen, but not until I was living on my own in college. Last year I was on the phone, and I saw a black figure walk past my room, quickly turn around, and walk back away. I thought it was my roommate, but it turns out she was upstairs the whole time and no one else was home. We quickly checked all of the ring footage in every area of the house, and there was nothing. So the weirdest thing is I heard the person run up the stairs, and I was yelling at them to come back, thinking it was my roommate, and got no response. For weeks prior to the occurrence, I had been having intense nightmares every time I closed my eyes. I kind of just thought I was freaking out until I started having sleep paralysis and demons in my bedroom. Obviously it was in my dreams, but it always felt realistic, and all of my roommates as well would be in my dreams, except they'd be possessed and treating me like nothing was going on, telling me to go back to sleep only for the dream to continue, and I would get tormented even more. In some of these dreams, I would be getting thrown around and tormented by demons and dark ghost figures in my room. My house was an old college house that had been around for decades, and according to my research, it was an old frat house that someone had died in. It was the craziest thing. You would feel the darkness and bad vibes around the house, like the basement had really dark corners and crevices, as well as the attic. Eventually, I saged my room and around the house, and the nightmares subsided for a little bit, but it still freaks me out, and I often have sleep paralysis to this day with really scary dreams and paralysis experiences on a normal basis. Not really sure what's going on. Shadow in the corner. When I was in 7th grade, we moved to a house out in the country, on an acreage in Iowa. The owners told my parents that it was supposedly haunted and a previous owner had passed away in the basement. It was an older house, and there were a few things that happened that were strange. That summer my parents had all left, and I stayed home by myself. I think they went to go pick up my brother or something. When they left, a storm started to build, and pretty quickly the wind picked up, and there was a full-blown thunderstorm in no time. This house had large windows in the living room facing the road looking out. I have always loved thunderstorms, but for some reason I was terrified this time, and the windows were rattling like they were going to break. It was freaky. This was from the winds of the storm, but we had lots of storms come through, and the windows never shuttered like that. We can attribute that to the weather and the age of the windows. The other story happened during the middle of a night. My older brother was a freshman in high school, and I was again in 7th grade, and we shared a room together. I woke up in the middle of the night screaming bloody murder, pounding and clawing at my window because there was a shadowy man in the corner close to my brother. My heart was pounding so hard, like it was flexing in a bodybuilding competition. Pure adrenaline. My brother woke up and was holding his blankets, looking at the corner for whatever this thing was. Eventually I calmed down, and I think I just passed out on my brother's bed next to him. I had always sleepwalked as a kid and as an adult too. I would have the same dreams sometimes when I'd sleepwalk, and it'd basically be this feeling put into shapes and sizes. It would be like tiny objects, and my whole body would feel like the tiny object, and then it would say, "Go away," and then instantly turn into a large, big object feeling and completely overtake me, and again my heart would be racing. This is very difficult to explain, but basically I feel sizes change in intensity with the sizes, and then I'd wake up and I'd be standing in the hallway or somewhere different than where I went to sleep. I've told this to some people, and one person said they had the exact same dreams, and this is what night terrors are. Another incident I had was in college. I had gone to bed before my roommates, and we lived in a duplex. I woke up in my room, and there was a shadow figure standing over my bed. I would be frozen, and it would grab me by the nape of my neck, and I would just be dangling over my bed looking at myself. It would then put me face down on my bed and push my face into the mattress and slither me back into my body in an S-shaped serpentine-like path. I could hear the sound of my skin rubbing against the mattress, and it would last for a longer time than what could be possible for how much bed area I had. Eventually I would be put back into my body, and I would be back in bed, paralyzed again. Then it would show me myself again by holding my neck like a cat and again slither me back into my body. All of this felt real. It was real to me and didn't feel like a dream. The sounds were so very real sounding and crisp, and the feeling just felt genuine. At the end of the experience it showed me to other areas of the duplex, and one room had a bright white light for a back wall. Eventually it took me back to my room and again slithered me back into my body, where I woke up and was freaked out. And when I woke up, it felt more like I was turned on, and there was no moment of me feeling like I was asleep, it was just a feeling like you can move now and open your eyes. So I went downstairs where my roommate was watching TV, and the first thing he said to me was, "Are you okay? You look like you just saw a ghost." Also in college before the duplex I was in a fraternity at SAE at Iowa State. The fraternity was built in, the early 1900s or maybe earlier? I don't recall, but it had a new section and an old section. The old section looked like a castle and was haunted. We had a house mom and a cook that would always be telling it to leave. They would have the stove tops turn on randomly, the clocks change time, and the lights turn on and off. There were lots of stories from that place. My first roommate there said he had a bunch of DVDs all tilted to one direction, and just out of nowhere they'd instantly be turned and would slant the other way. There are other stories, but I can't recall. As of recently I've been having more and more extremely crazy synchronicities. I've had moments of clairvoyance as well. The biggest one was when I was helping my girlfriend move and we were listening to the Beatles, My Choice. Randomly, A Day in the Life came on, which is my favorite Beatles song. I said, "Hey, this is my favorite." When she interrupted me by saying, "Hey, look at this book. The book is called A Day in the Life of Marlon Bundo." I was speechless, so I took the book and started reading it. As I'm reading the book, the lyrics Paul McCartney sings, "Woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head, found my way downstairs, and drank a cup." Simultaneously, I'm reading in the book, "I woke up all alone, then I ate a fine funny breakfast all alone. While I watched the news all alone." While in awe, the song goes into "I read the news today, oh boy." Such a surreal moment for me. So months later I'm at my girlfriend's wedding. The groom's dad has blonde hair like me, and somehow I feel a connection without talking to him. My girlfriend steps away, and naturally we start talking. He tells me about how he produces music and created his own stylized Beatles songs. I also do improv and comedy sketch writing, so we start talking about how our ideas come to us. We are antennae receiving these songs/comedic ideas. It's such a great convo. He introduces me to his wife, who is a Reiki healer, and my Beatles Synchronicity story comes up. She tells me this isn't a coincidence, and I need to find a guru and explore this side of me. A day later I can't sleep, and I'm obsessing about all of my other synchronicities and spiritual feelings, and I look up on Wikipedia a day in the life, and I read that it was released on May 26, 1967. I then realized, hey, it's May right now, and the 26th was the day I told this couple about my synchronicity. It just shook me, as this synchronicity is so amazing. I do believe this is a spiritual connection of some sort, and I'm starting to realize I'm more of a spiritual person than I realized. If anyone has any guru recommendations in Los Angeles, please let me know, and any insight into what any of this means would be helpful. 3 paranormal encounters I had in the same home. I wanted to share a few weird encounters/experiences I've had in the past with everyone. Although I remain somewhat skeptical about the existence of paranormal activity, these minor occurrences cause my thoughts to oscillate. I lived in a home that my family rented out over a decade ago. I do not live there anymore. It was a small place but was comfortable for my 4-person family. I originally bunked with my brother in this house but felt I needed my own space and made the finished basement my room a few months into living there. The person we rented the house from had lost their mother to old age months before we moved in. She comfortably died in her home in her bed with her loved ones around her. This happened to be the same house that we rented out. You can probably see where I'm going with this story. From the moment I finished setting up my room in the basement of that house, I felt uneasy staying down there. I always had this feeling that I was genuinely never alone. I felt like I was constantly being watched by someone from a distance. This could have been my 10-year-old self being scared of ghosts and spirits. Let's start with the first experience I had down there. It was the evening of a school night, and I had settled into my room and onto my bed. I was playing around with my laptop watching videos. I remember doing a double take at this stack of white shirts I had meticulously placed on a bin against my wall. It was leaned against it so it wouldn't fall over. At first, I remember seeing the stack of shirts sway a little. I didn't think anything of it when I first glanced. It wasn't until I saw the stack of shirts violently plummet towards the floor that I had to look back in pure fear. There was no way they could have fallen over, much less with that much force from the way I had them stacked. The incident unsettled me for several days and made it difficult to sleep for a short period of time. Now that one wasn't so bad, right? It's just a stack of clothes that fell over, no big deal. Well, here comes the second experience I had. This one freaked me out way more. To start off this next experience, I have to explain how there was this toy RC car that I got that previous Christmas that was pretty basic. There was nothing special about it. It was a monster truck that had the remote with the one wheel on it to turn it and a trigger for acceleration. It also had cool lights on it for the front and back. Before the car took off after hitting the trigger, it would make this loud chirping noise and then go. It was almost similar to a gun cocking, but the sound was chirping instead of a gun cocking noise, I guess? I can't really describe it well other than that. It was nighttime, around 11 p.m. to 12 a.m., I don't remember the exact time, I just remember being a few hours after falling asleep. I was sleeping pretty peacefully after playing some video games. After getting into the deeper part of my sleep, I suddenly wake up. I hear the chirping noise from my toy car sitting on the ground, and then it takes off across my floor about 6 feet. It was pitch black in my room at night, so I was able to see the lights on the car fly across my room. I was confused at first. I got out of bed to make sure it was off by flipping off the switch and then going back to sleep. Not too long after that, I woke up to the same noise. It was the chirping and then the driving across the floor. This time I was freaked out. I went up to it hesitantly and took the batteries out so there was zero chance it could happen again. After falling back asleep for the third time, I hear it. That same chirping noise and the car going across the floor. I almost screamed in terror. I was shaking at the fact that there were no batteries in this car, and it still managed to turn on and drive across my floor. After that I just took the car into the laundry room that was attached to the basement, closed the door, and went back to sleep, where I went undisturbed the rest of the night. The last experience I had was more of an encounter than anything. This one is short but, to me, the craziest. It was simply another evening, after school, doing the same thing I was doing in the first story. Only this time, I felt a subtle unease while sitting on my bed. It was like this dagger feeling in my chest from out of nowhere. I stopped what I was doing and looked around my quiet room. I felt like someone was with me. Everyone else in my family was upstairs doing whatever it was they were doing. After surveying my room from my bed, I felt an unforgettable freezing gust sweep around my body. It wasn't a shiver at all, because I wasn't truly scared before that moment. After I felt that gust, it felt like someone was going to sit down next to me. I looked to my immediate left, and I see my mattress pushed down as if someone were laying their hand on my bed. I literally saw the mattress create a crater shaped like a fist, located maybe 6 inches away from my body. I was frozen in fear and in shock. I honestly blacked out after that and forgot if I went to go tell my mom about what happened or not. That is pretty much the extent of my paranormal encounters wrapped up into a much longer than expected. I clearly think that it was the landlord's past mother that was lingering in the house and causing these events that I experienced. I never really understood what else it could have been, but I will tell you that I truly know that these events did happen. I may have been young, but the fact that I don't remember much from those times makes these memories all the more real and true to me. I remember dreams and nightmares I had from even before that time. These were not dreams. These events caused me to feel conflicted about the existence of the paranormal. I hope this was an enjoyable read if you got to this point, and sleep well tonight. Can someone tell me what that was? This story is based in Ireland. Back in the early 2010s I moved out from home for college. I moved into a large 3-story terraced house in the center of the city. I lived with 5 other girls, who usually used to go back to their family homes on the weekends. I was often left completely alone at the weekends, and I dreaded it. Being alone didn't bother me, but the problem was I wasn't completely alone. Nothing unusual happened for the first few weeks after I had moved into the house, that I noticed. I loved my new room. It was spacious and had a French door with heavy velvet curtains that draped either side of it. I had a double bed that was pushed against the right wall of my bedroom, so only one side of the bed was open to the room. My room was on the 3rd floor of the house and the only room to have a balcony. The balcony faced towards a courtyard of sorts. There were no other balconies or roofs near my balcony, so no one could access it unless they were in my room. This gave me a sense of security. Around mid-October, I had been living in the house for a few weeks now. I was comfortable. I knew the house next door that was connected to the right side of my bedroom wall was vacant. But I started to hear scraping from inside the wall. I put it down to there being rats or mice next door. The houses were very old and were close to a river too, so it made sense. This scraping sound would go on for ages at night and first thing in the morning. It bothered me so much I had tried to record it, but my phone never picked it up. How normal, right? I used to sleep in my bed facing the wall, so there was technically space for another person beside me. One night I woke up abruptly after being punched in the shoulder, hard. I got such a fright that it didn't register what had happened. I turned on the light on my phone because it's the only one I had close to me and started shining it around the room. But no one was there. I always kept my bedroom door locked with a sliding bolt from the inside, because there were always people on the go in the house, and sometimes my housemates had friends over. So it would be impossible for someone to get in. I thought that I had imagined it and fell back asleep after a few minutes. The next night, the same thing happened again. But when I woke up and turned my flashlight on and looked around my room, no one or nothing was there. So I tried to go back to sleep. As soon as I turned my back to the room, it happened, and I was still awake. I got punched in the back as I was awake, and I felt it as clear as day. I lay paralyzed with fear in the bed. It was then that I felt the icy cold of the bedroom. Not the usual winter cold that you would feel in a room when it gets a little chilly. This was ice cold, where you could see your breath. I mustered every ounce of courage I had in me to turn back around with my flashlight and check the room corner to corner, but nothing was there. I got up and turned the light on and slept with the light on for the rest of the night. The same thing happened the next morning. The scratching continued on the wall next to my bed. I met one of my roommates, who stayed in a bedroom across the hall from me, and came out of her room. We chatted and walked together downstairs to get some breakfast. At this point I had told no one what was happening to me because I was so scared they would think I was either lying or a complete freak, and I really wanted to make friends with the girls that I lived with. My roommate was visibly spooked as she went about her business in the kitchen. I asked if she was okay, and she told me what happened but was laughing to herself as if we'd both think she had gone mad. She said that last night she was wide awake in bed reading a book when her phone started moving by itself up and down a shelf in her bedroom. She said it wasn't vibrating, causing it to move, it was being dragged. She proceeded to tell me that she had been having sleep paralysis nightmares since she moved in, where an old hag was sitting in the corner of her room and slowly would crawl onto her legs and up her body so she couldn't move. This was happening to her every night. I decided to share with her what was happening to me too. We both silently accepted the reality of our situation. We decided not to tell the other girls because we didn't want to freak them out, and surely they would tell us if anything was happening to them. That night I came up with a plan to line the left side of my bed with clothes as a barrier so nothing could reach me. In my head this made sense, but yeah, it absolutely did not work. The same thing happened again. I was punched in my shoulder, and the more I tried to ignore it, the harder it got. I had a mark on my shoulder from the punch. I repeated the same thing again, where I used my phone's flashlight to check out my room before turning on the light to go to sleep. The next night I decided to sleep on my back. I woke up at 3 or 4 in the morning to my balcony door wide open and the cold November rain coming into my room. My balcony was locked with a key from the inside, and it was now wide open. I leapt out of bed to close the door and got saturated in the process. Now I was mad. Scaring me is one thing, but attempting to give me pneumonia is another. This happened a few more nights in a row. I made sure to check the door was locked before going to bed and went as far as to put the key under my pillow as I slept. It didn't make a difference. As the weeks went on, I started to experience the extreme sleep paralysis. I can't tell you if it was from the continuous nights of interrupted sleep or something otherworldly, but it was awful. My sleep paralysis was different from my roommates. I would be wide awake looking around my room, my body paralyzed, to a black mist lingering but never getting close to me. As the year neared December, I felt relief that I would be going home to my family for a few weeks for Christmas. On one of the last nights before Christmas break, I lay in bed watching a TV show on my laptop. It was still not late, only around 8 p.m. I started to hear thundering footsteps on the stairs outside my bedroom. Thinking it was my housemates, I popped my head out to check. No one was there. I went across the hall to their bedrooms to ask if they heard it or if it had been them. They said no, they had not even heard it. I told the housemate who was having similar experiences that I would text them again if it happened. I was not back in my room 2 minutes when there it was again. It was coming from the stairs in front of my bedroom from within the house. I texted my housemate, and she didn't hear a thing. I knew it was in for it tonight. This was all happening with every light in the house turned on, by the way. I was too afraid to walk around in the dark, understandably. I tried to relax back into watching my TV show when the heavy velvet curtains that were pulled closed across my balcony door started to gently rock. There were no windows open in the house for a breeze to be passing through. I texted my housemate and told her what was happening. She decided to sleep in my bedroom for the night. We fell asleep around 10 p.m. with the lights off. Again, as predicted, nearing 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning, we both woke up because the bedroom light had been turned on. She went back to her own room and left me to sleep alone in my room for the rest of the morning. I didn't turn off the light, I kept it on and hoped sleep would find me. But it never did. I stayed awake the entire night and was so stressed out I gave myself a migraine. I skipped college the next day because I had zero energy. When I left for a few weeks over Christmas, I felt extreme relief. Weirdly enough, nothing happened when I returned after Christmas. I still cannot explain anything that happened or what it could even have been. It opened my eyes to everything spooky. When I was moving out towards the end of the college year, I brought up everything that I experienced to my housemates. Turns out one of them staying in a room on the second floor saw a full-body apparition of a lady standing at the end of her bed. Another had a guest stay over who saw another full-body apparition of a man walking in circles in the second-floor hallway, didn't realize it was a ghost, and tried to have a conversation with it. Funny in hindsight but not funny at the time. I always had a feeling of being chased any time I went up the stairs, resulting in me absolutely sprinting every time. As if my bedroom that I was sprinting to was any safer. I've since found out that I'm an empath. I don't know if this makes a difference. I've had plenty of creepy experiences since. If anyone has any insight into what they think this was, please let me know. Possible demonic entity or something else, spanning multiple years. I'm going to try to keep this as short as I possibly can without omitting key details, so just bear with me, please. I'm trying to get as many opinions as possible. Disclaimer, I was a heavy 4-meth and heroin user from my teens until 31, now sober almost 7 years. I believe my drug use may have played a role in some eerie experiences I had. Around Christmas 2015, my sister gifted me a 1950s Ouija board. After using it in my home, I began feeling watched, items would move or vanish, and a dark presence loomed. That summer, I developed MRSA and sepsis, landing me in the ICU for a month. While drugs were the clear cause, it felt like something evil was shadowing me. After recovering, I stayed clean for a year and a half, and my sister and I got a house together. One day, she, another sister, and I used the Ouija board in our backyard, trying to contact our late mother. The board responded that we weren't speaking to her but to something named Viscus. A crow watched us from a dead tree the entire session. The next morning at 4 a.m., a loud crash woke me. The tree had fallen through our fence, landing inches from my bedroom window. From that moment on, my sister and I experienced intense sleep paralysis and an overwhelming sense of constant surveillance. One morning, I saw what I thought was my sister crawling on my bedroom floor, but when I checked, no one was there. Later, another sister and I took the board to a Civil War-era cemetery, Chapel of the Cross. As we set up, an intense fog rolled in, our candles blew out, and a heavy, oppressive energy overwhelmed us. We fled, but I felt dazed, tired, and possessed all night. By early 2018, I relapsed into heavy drug use. My sister and I separated, and in July, my best friend and I used the Ouija board at my apartment. The board spelled no H, which we took to mean no heroin. The next night, at her house, along with another girl, I felt absolutely awful, like I was dying, but still prepared a big ol' shot of heroin/meth. Immediately, something went wrong. I began speaking in a very deep, unintelligible, non-English sounding voice, alternating between that and my normal voice and language, pleading for help. My friends were terrified as I screamed in an unnatural, demonic voice for hours. Eventually, my friends locked themselves in another room while I passed out. The next morning, they were distant and were acting as if I had done something wrong. Later that day, I decided I wanted to go back to my house, so I left, got pulled over, and was arrested for drug possession. By late 2018, I was in a Christian-based rehab, which I initially despised. I eventually started to embrace the program and investigate my belief in God. One night, lying in bed but fully awake, I felt a tap on my leg. I turned and saw what I can only describe as a tall, terrifying female-like demon with a long face and sharp teeth. If you've ever seen the movie The Devil's Advocate, that's pretty much what it looked like. I let out a scream that woke the entire house. I jumped down from my bed and ran from the room in tears, shaking. I had to be consoled by my friends for hours. When I was finally able to get back in my bed, I held a cross in my hand all night. After that, I've never had another experience like that again. Since then, I've felt free. Although I explored Christianity for a while, I now believe in God as well as other spiritual aspects. I've been sober for nearly 7 years. I wonder if these were drug-induced hallucinations, manifestations of my subconscious, or real dark entities, demons, or something else? I believe drugs can open people up to negative forces and increase the chance of evil entities. I'd love to hear others' thoughts. True demonic encounters. I would like to start by saying whether you believe in demons or not. I can, for one, say that I know they are real and do exist. What I am about to share with you are real events and not fictional. This is why I mention no names, including the demon's name. I get chills just recounting these encounters. To preface, I am a 45-year-old gay male. My demonic encounter started when I moved into my first apartment in the summer of 1992. I was 20 at the time. Unfortunately, my demonic encounter lasted for nearly 8 years before I could finally get rid of it for good. I will only cover a few of the most terrifying occurrences that happened over that 8-year period. Now on to my story. I had moved to Casper, Wyoming, a town about 55 miles from where I graduated from high school that year. A friend of mine turned me onto a cute 2-bedroom apartment on Elm Street. Yes, I did say Elm Street, folks. The apartment was the basement floor of a 2-story house that has been converted into 2 apartments. My friend had recently moved into the main floor apartment and suggested my boyfriend at the time, and I took the bottom unit. It was an ideal situation since we all worked at the same mall at the time. In mid-June, the apartment lacked air conditioning, making it extremely hot. I was in the middle of painting the master bedroom when I decided to take a break from the fumes and the heat and headed to the kitchen to get a tall glass of iced tea and have a quick smoke. Now keep in mind I was the only one in the apartment at the time, as my boyfriend was working. If I recall, it was around 11 p.m., and he was not due home until after 1 a.m. or around there. After finishing my smoke, I headed back to the bedroom to finish painting. As I walked back into the room, every hair on my entire body stood on end. My heart began to beat out of my chest as I realized there was something painted on the opposite wall of where I had been painting. There was no paint spilled on the carpet, and the brush I had been using was right where I left it. Heart still pounding, I slowly crept up to the wall. The paint was still wet and slowly dripping down the wall. I gasped in horror as I read what was painted on the wall. It simply read, "I am here." I bolted the duck out of there and waited outside on the stoop until my boyfriend came home. I was not about to go back to the apartment again by myself. My boyfriend, being a skeptic, dismissed it as maybe I had done it myself without remembering, or that the upstairs neighbor had snuck in and painted it, even though they were not home at the time the occurrence had happened. Fast forward a few months. We had been gone all day, and it was late when we got home. Having an early day the next day, I headed for the shower while he grabbed himself a beer. As I was showering, I heard the door to the bathroom open and close. I remember smiling to myself, thinking he was going to join me in the shower for some playtime. I was in the middle of rinsing the conditioner out of my hair when I heard the shower curtain slide open. "Decided you wanted a quickie before bed, eh?" I asked, still rinsing my hair. "Sounds good to me," said a voice that was not my boyfriend's. The voice sounded gravelly and low. About that time I felt ice-cold hands grab my shoulders from behind. I spun around in horror only to discover I was in the shower alone. I exited the bathroom in such haste I did not even bother to grab a towel. Heart pounding and dripping wet, I was now in the front room panting and trying to catch my breath. My boyfriend is shaking uncontrollably and pointing to the bathroom. His eyes were fixed, and he appeared to be in a state of shock. His voice quivering, he whispered, "I saw it go in there." Fast forward 2 years. We had just moved into another basement apartment. This one was on the other side of town. It too was a house that has been transformed into 2 separate units. The house's owner and his boyfriend resided upstairs, receiving an attractive rent offer. I think we were paying $200,000 a month for the 2-bedroom apartment. We had only lived there about 2 months before the demonic activity started up again. There were old-fashioned swinging doors like you would find in those old Western movies that separated the front room and the kitchen. We had lived in the new place for about 2 months, and there was no supernatural activity of any kind. We were thinking maybe the entity had not followed us to our new home and had begun to truly relax. We were dead wrong. My boyfriend and I had just finished our intimate thing and were settling down to sleep when the saloon doors between the kitchen and living room began to swing back and forth with a vengeance. The night lights in the kitchen and our bedroom went out, leaving us completely in the dark. "Come play with me," a demonic voice called out to my boyfriend from the kitchen. It was so loud it echoed through the entire apartment. Still shrouded in complete darkness, both he and I shook uncontrollably under the covers. We began to quietly argue over who was going to make a break for the light switch located on the wall by the door. Not knowing what else to do, I yelled for it to leave in Jesus' name. The entity roared so loudly I swear you could feel the house shake. We could hear the saloon doors fly open, the night lights came back on, and we were alone again, for how long we didn't know. It took us about 20 minutes before we could muster up enough courage to move. Needless to say, we did not get any sleep that night and had every light in the place on. Fast forward another couple weeks. Our company for the evening had just left, and my boyfriend and I had settled in our recliners in the front room to watch a movie and chill for the remainder of the evening. A loud knock on the front door signaling one of our friends had probably forgotten their car keys or something caused my boyfriend to pause the movie and head to the door. He stopped short and shot me a concerned look. Puzzled, I asked him if he was going to get the door or not. He pointed out the motion-censored light was not on. Opening the door, he visibly shivered, as there was nobody there and no vehicles in the drive but our own. As he shut the door, there came a loud crash and the sound of glass breaking from the kitchen. Walking into the kitchen, it took me a minute to figure out what had happened. The coffee pot that was tucked into the corner by the sink was now lying in a zillion pieces under the dining room table. The knocking started up again on the front door. Again, no light to indicate somebody was actually there. Then the knocking switched to the back door. Actually, it was more like pounding. The pounding was hard and loud. I was sure the door was going to cave in. The air became so thick and heavy it was hard to breathe. That was enough for us that night. My boyfriend and I bolted out of the house and spent the remainder of the night at a local Denny's restaurant drinking coffee, too terrified to return to the house until morning. Now fast forward another couple of years. By this time we had found a beautiful 2-story home to rent. We loved it because there was a spiral staircase between the 2 floors. The front door led you to the main floor of the home, where the kitchen, dining room, and living room were. The back door leads you into the basement, where the bedrooms and bathroom are located. It was a very cute little house, and we loved it. That is until the entity found us again. I say this because after each move it seemed it took it a while to either find us or decide to show it head anyway. I would usually dream that I was standing in a large room with doors all around it. In the dream, all the doors would all start slamming shut one at a time as I ran from door to door trying to escape. As the last one slammed shut, the room would fill with demonic laughter, which is how I knew it had found us again. The night after having this dream, my husband and I were downstairs in our bedroom putting our laundry away when we heard my mother hollering down to us from the top of the stairs for us to come up and visit with her. We shot one another a confused look because my mother lived about 55 miles away and never came over without calling first. That and both the front and back doors were locked. With my boyfriend at my heels, I headed upstairs to visit, suspecting that my mom had made a copy of our house key. As I approached the top of the stairs, I could see the front door was still locked and there was no sign of my mom anywhere. The temperature in the living room had dropped drastically, causing me to shiver. As I moved into the living room, my boyfriend walked to the front door, opened it, and confirmed that there was no car in the driveway. That is when we both saw a large black mass make its way slowly across the wall from the kitchen into the dining room. Its slow movement appeared to be deliberate, as if it wanted us to see it. As it moved through the dining room into the front room, my mother's picture flew off the wall, past me, and went straight down into the basement. As the years progressed, so did the entity's activities. It had gotten so bad that even our friends and family refused to come over. They too would see the black mass, witness things moving on their own, and hear a disembodied voice calling their names. One morning I had just arrived home from a 13-hour night shift and had settled on the couch to watch some television before heading to bed. Out of nowhere, there was a huge boom. It sounded like a bomb had gone off. The whole house, and I mean the whole house, began to shake violently. It only lasted about 10 seconds or so, I am not sure because it felt much longer than that. I quickly ran outdoors, thinking maybe a gas main in the neighborhood had exploded or maybe we had an earthquake. All was calm and still, no one else seemed to even be aware that something major had just happened. As I was on the phone to the police department reporting what had just happened, my boyfriend and my brother, who had stayed the night in our guest room, came tearing upstairs in a panic. Their faces were pale white, and you could see they were truly terrified. The police assured me that nobody else had reported anything and that maybe it was just my house settling. My brother said the house shook so violently it shook him right out of bed onto the floor. At that moment, I recognized the presence of the demon and decided to take decisive action to eradicate it permanently. I had several ministers, priests, and mediums come to my house. The mediums were at least more helpful. The religious men were too afraid to do anything at all and simply said, "Pray," and left. I finally found a minister who specialized in deliverance ministry. She was well versed in dealing with demonic activity and getting rid of it. She was able to ascertain the demon's name, which gave her power over it, or Jesus, whatever. She told me it was not her exorcising the demon but rather the power and the blood of Jesus. I also learned that the demon was not actually attached to me but rather to my boyfriend. I learned the reason it always took the demon a while to show back up was the cleansing rituals I had been doing were working to a point, but that my boyfriend was the one that kept opening up the door, so to speak, for it to return. I was not aware of it at the time, but he had not only been dabbling with witchcraft, but he was also meeting strangers in the graveyard for getting physical since the cops heavily patrolled the city parks. They used to be a popular location for impromptu hookups and drug use. Needless to say, I was able to finally rid myself of the demon and my boyfriend. Unfortunately for him, the demon followed him, and his life quickly fell apart. He got into drugs, alcohol, and worse. He passed away last year unexpectedly. We remained friends over the years and would talk on the phone or text. A week before his death, he confided in me that the demon was still tormenting him. I am uncertain about the circumstances surrounding my ex, the details have largely been kept private. I just pray that he is at peace now. Grandma's house. Ghost kid. Yeah, these next few incidents happened in the past, around 5 to maybe 10 years ago, since I was younger. This first story was from my grandma herself, we still talk about it. Back in around 2012 to 2013, I was 7 or something like that, and my grandma was in a Skype call with my aunt, her daughter. I was sitting behind my nana watching TV while she was on the call. I was visible in the call, and I was wearing, a black shirt and shorts, so I got up and went to the room where I and my sister slept. So as I'm in there, probably watching TV again, of course, my grandmother gets asked by my aunt if I was still behind her. My grandmother responds with a no, saying that I had just gone to me and my sister's room. My aunt supposedly saw a boy around my age, maybe younger, behind my grandmother, but he was really blurry. Like you could tell he was a boy, but his face was blurred. The night went on and nothing happened. We still have no clue what in the 8th degree of duck that was. Second encounter, this one might have been the same year. My cousin and the same aunt from the last story came down because it was around some sort of big holiday gathering we usually have. They decided to sleep in the living room downstairs, the room I am sleeping in right now. Well, it comes the next morning, and my cousin starts up his Xbox and gets ready to play some legendary game like Left 4 Dead or something. When he sees a boy walk diagonally from him in the hallway into a bedroom. Luckily his mom was there to see it too. I must have come down in time because as I came down they told me about how it just had happened. My 7-year-old self was pretty spooked but really didn't understand until now. 5 paranormal things I've witnessed throughout my entire life. My name is Jay, and I was born in Australia, Canberra. I've always been curious about the unknown, especially the paranormal. However, my time spent researching these things has led me to skepticism, and I've joined the Skeptic Society in my local area. I have a deep loathing for people who make up paranormal stories because these make real paranormal stories look like bullshit. This is why I'm extremely skeptical of any paranormal stories. First experience. Same reoccurring nightmare from between the, rough estimated, ages of 3 and 7. I always used to have the same nightmares of a large, naked, Caucasian-looking man of medium build, I never noticed his genitals, that stood over 7 feet tall and had the scars of a burn all over his body. His eyes had a bright color to them, I'm not sure what color, but his pupil was clearly visible, and he had a bald head. He always stood at the end of the hallway, and at night I would dream about myself walking out of my bedroom and into the hallway, then being encountered by the large dark shadowy figure, which was that man. Most of the time it was dark, and I could only see the shadowy form of the figure from the moonlight through the window of the door that the figure was standing in front of. But sometimes the lights were on, or there was a storm, and when the lightning flashed, I could see what he looked like. The second after seeing the man, I would get a very strong negative vibe, and the doors would automatically shut closed, and I could never open them. When I screamed, no sound would come out, and a very strong force would pull me in towards the man whenever I tried to run back to the opposite end of the hallway from where the man was standing. I never really remember how the dream ends, but this nightmare would constantly reoccur but in slightly different variations because I would do different things. It all stopped around the age of 7, and that was after one strange variation of that dream. Basically I was dreaming of myself in the hallway, and I would see the figure standing there. Instead of running away in intense fear, because I knew running away would never work, I ran up towards the man, jumped up, and hugged him. I showed love towards him instead of fear, and it was the first time I ever saw him smile. That was the last time I've ever had any dream like that. Second experience. These next few experiences happened in a different house than the first, and it was the third house I moved into, which happened at the age of 7, but I only experienced paranormal stuff in that house until the rough age of 9. I'll call this house 26, I don't live there anymore, because that was its address. Around the age of 9 or 10 in house 26, I came out of the shower. It was nighttime, and when I walked towards my room, I could hear someone walking around, the sound of rattling paper, and shadows being cast from my room onto the entrance of the room. The light was from the lava lamp. The door was 3/4 shut, and I saw the shadow moving on the ground of that 1/4 open. I thought to myself that it was strange because why would anyone snoop in my room? I still got negative vibes from it and walked into the lounge room, that's also connected to the kitchen. I literally saw everyone in that house in the lounge room and kitchen, there were 5 people there. Third experience. This also happened in house 26, and it was probably between the ages of 10 and 11. This was a large house, and my dad had an office in the second lounge room. My little brother and I had 2 computers that we had access to, however, we only got around 2 hours of time on the computers, and we always spent it playing games like RuneScape and Adventure Quest. I came up with the idea to wake up early in the morning, from 3 a.m. until 6 a.m., so we could sneak out and play games. We were doing this for a long time, but it stopped on the day when we were playing games around 4 a.m., and suddenly one of the curtains at the back of the room started to shake around everywhere quite violently. The window was closed, so it couldn't have been the wind, and the lights were on. My brother noticed first, but I couldn't hear it because of the headphones. When I looked at him, I saw an extremely shocked look on his face, then I looked towards where he was looking and saw the curtains shaking violently. I took off my headphones and could hear it. Then my little brother jumped over the desk, he was closer to it because his desk was at the back of the room, and we bolted off to our rooms. It was terrifying. Fourth experience. This is when I went camping far out in the wilderness. I was horseback riding in the Blue Mountains with a horseback riding tourist group. We rode over 200 kilometers away from civilization. We set up camp at this grassy spot, we slept in those outdoor sleeping bag things, and I was first to go asleep around the fire. Then I randomly woke up at night, and everyone was asleep, and the fire was put out. I could hear this faint noise of a woman with a deep voice moaning meaningless sounds, and it started to get louder and louder. I could hear the voice echoing around the mountains. Then I went back to sleep, and that's all that ever happened with that experience. Oh, and I was 13 at the time. Fifth experience, UFO. This happened this year, and I was 17, and still am 17, at the time. Basically, I had a pretty intense experience with a close friend of mine, and later on that night he was giving me a lift back home. We were on the highway, and we were at an intersection. The streets were lit with yellow streetlights. However, I noticed something strange about one of the streetlights because it was moving. Then I looked up and saw 3 other yellow streetlights floating around in a triangle formation. They were very close to the streetlights. They seemed to be floating like a fast balloon moving around in directions on a 3-dimensional axis. My first thought was that it was the reflection of the streetlights on the window, but I had a better look and opened the window, and these lights were still there. My second thought was that they were drones. However, drones, the small rotor drones, are quite loud. My friend didn't notice it, and he drove right past it, so I was so full of awe that I didn't mention it until we were past it on the next road. I told my friend who was driving that I saw it, and he didn't believe it, so I begged him to drive back so I could prove it to him. The lights were still there, but he was only slightly surprised and asked him if he had any idea what it was, and he just responded by saying he's not sure but also didn't seem to care. Usually I wouldn't bother telling people these things, but the reason I am is because I want to know if anyone else has had these experiences. Big thanks to those who've actually taken their time to listen to everything. This is why I fear the dark. And I will never again challenge the notion that other things exist. Ever since childhood I can recall pondering and questioning things. I was so suspicious of the Santa Claus lie that I actively worked to catch my parents setting the presents. I did. I was 5. God was never a firmly held belief, it was always more of a guilty feeling, something to fear. I am now an atheist and very scientifically inclined. When I was in 1st grade, my parents moved from Ottawa to El Salvador, my dad's birth country. We moved into this 3-bedroom 2-story house owned by my aunt. My aunt was the only occupant prior to its construction, approximately 5 years ago. Before that, the land was a coffee farm. Therefore, it doesn't have a significant past. To the best of my knowledge, no individual has passed away there. I was young, so I was always afraid of going upstairs by myself. Once I got to the top of the stairs, I would run towards the wall about 10 feet in front of me to flick the light switch. I always made sure I didn't look into the rooms before I did so. Once the light was on, I was safe. It took some work, but I finally got over my fear. This occurred by the time I was around 11 or 12. It didn't last long. I am 21 years old now. I fear the dark. The spiral and the lady. First, sorry, but some background, as if there's not enough yet. As you enter my home, you will be in the living room. To your left is a bathroom and some steps, which make a U-turn and go upstairs. To your right is the living room, and ahead is the dining room and yard. As you get upstairs, ahead of you is a wall with a light switch, next to the bathroom door. To the right of you are 2 doors, the first is my sister's, and the second is mine and my brother's. To your left, and in front of my shared room, is my parents' room. Above you, about 12 feet high, is the ceiling. So from the spot where the stairs turn to go up to the ceiling above, there is an 18-foot or so high gap. Clarification can be provided if requested. The upstairs is the setting for the following story. My first unusual experience in that house was very low-key. It would have gone unregistered and forgotten if it weren't for the fact that someone else saw it too. I was lying in bed, wide awake, listening to everyone in the house snoring in their deep slumber. I was looking at my parents' bedroom door, since my bed was facing it at the time. About 4 feet from the floor, on the door, was this faint, almost not there, spiral. It would slowly wind into itself, disappear, then pop back into existence. Rinse and repeat. The entire process would take about 5 seconds. I remember thinking it was a gathering. I don't know what that means, but I do remember thinking that. I stared at it for a few minutes until I finally just shrugged it off and eventually found my sleep. You see, it was so damned faint that I could have believed it wasn't there. Plus, I didn't believe in ghosts and shit. In the morning, while having cereal, I spoke of this weird faint spiral I saw. My sister immediately looks up and says, "Hey, I saw it too." She's just my stupid little sister, I thought, seeking my attention. So I didn't give her any more clues. I told her to tell me what she saw, exactly. I vividly remember her tracing the pattern of the spiral in the air while she was telling where it was and how it faded into itself before popping back to existence. But after she confirmed my sighting, I recall finding it strange but not scary. I now have this theory that, had I stayed up, I would have lost my mind that night. I don't know why, but I feel like that was the lady, gathering energy or something. I don't ducking know. But this is where the mildness ends. Fast forward to about a year later. For some reason, I've been waking up every night for about 2 weeks now. It was always at a time when everyone was asleep. I would just wake up and be wide awake for what felt like hours before falling back to sleep. It was one of these nights, and I was wide awake. We had rearranged our room so that my bed was against the wall next to the bathroom, so I had a diagonal view of the hallway and the top of the stairs. I turned left while lying down, and when I did, I caught something white in the corner of my eye. I turned to look at it and saw a long, white shape floating about 2 feet below the ceiling, high up above the steps. My first reaction was to look away, to face the wall. Then my mind immediately got to work. What the duck was that? I remember trying to figure out what it could be. But I could not find a reasonable explanation. I knew my house well. And I knew there was nothing that looked remotely like it anywhere around. There was a window nearby, but it was facing the wrong way. And anyway, it doesn't ducking matter, because my inquisitive, stupid, little mind told me I had to find out what it was. So I sat up, leaned forward, and stared. It was a ducking lady. As my mind processed the details, my body tightened and my brain attempted to jump out of my skull. My eyes burned every ducking horrible detail into the back of my skull, so I can handily keep it with me until my death. She was facing the wall. Her hair was long, almost down to her waist. Her dress was gown-like. Her feet were floating, angled downwards, with slipper-like shoes. The door, the creeping doubt, and reassurance. About 2 years later, we moved to a suburb in Los Angeles. While I lived in that city, I lived in 3 different apartments. 2 with my parents, and then the one I got with my friends. The second one I moved to with my parents is where this incident occurred. Listen, I saw the things I told you about previously. I did. I was awake. It wasn't anything but that. I will take it to my ducking grave, but people grow up. I grew up. And I started to question it. Because time passes and it eases the fears, a bit, and it made no sense to my grown mind. This doesn't justify my stupidity, I think. It should have been obvious from the start. But let's get on with this story. I just typed out the first part, and I'm kind of regretting it. Nothing happened or anything, I just don't feel well. My heart feels too big. Okay, I will make it brief. This apartment's closet, yeah, that kind of door. Sorry, consisted of huge, thick, white painted wooden doors that hung on a set of rails near the ceiling. The doors had wheels on top so they could slide around. This is why I think I was taunting them. Like I said, I was starting to have doubts by this time. I was like 17 or 18 years old. One Saturday morning I woke up and stayed in bed. For some reason, following some masochistic train of thought, I ended up watching ghost videos on YouTube. The entire time I was watching, I was desperately searching for some video that was real. That I could say, holy. And no one had answers to. But none came. So I was debunking them the entire time. You know, just saying how ducking fake they are. I eventually stopped doing that around 2 p.m. and then spent some time relaxing in the living room. At about 5 or 6 p.m., while I was halfway through watching Pulp Fiction for the first time, I got a call. My buddies are down the street, and they're asking me if I want to chill. I said, of course, grabbed my pants, and then ran into my room to get my shirt from the closet. At this time, 1 door was to my right, and 2 were to my left. One was on the rails, and another one had fallen behind it, leaning on the clothes hanging in the closet. I reached into the closet, near the single door on the right, the left was my sister's side, when the door that was leaning against the clothes slid about a whole foot towards me as I was looking at it. I remember everything, how the clothes were pushed by it, how I heard it slide against the carpet, and how it was kind of pushed up and forward. It tilted back a bit, you know, like a tiny wheel. I jumped back like 3 ducking feet while screaming like a ducking girl at the top of my lungs, then stood back and said out loud, what the duck was that? And the moment I uttered those words, I realized that I did not want to know, so I ducking bolted out the door and leaned back against a wall in the apartment complex. People were looking at me. I was shirtless, and they surely heard me scream. I didn't say anything and ran to my friends. I curled up and cried a little bit, manned up, got a cigarette, and hung out with them. Eventually I get a call from a very scared mom, making sure I was fine and asking me where the duck I was. I ran home, feeling bad. My mom opens the door, and I walk in behind her and close it. Walk forward a little, and then my room and the closet came into view. I backed up, hit the door, And kept trying to, I don't know, squeeze outside while I cried and freaked the duck out. I swear I wanted to just die and never experience this kind of shit again. My parents were worried and asked me what happened. I told them. My mom believed me. I don't know if she believed me when I told her about the lady. So I never told anyone. Not for years. I don't know if some of you are thinking, what, a ducking closet door moved? I get that. But picture this. Look at something big and heavy, something that would be difficult to move. Now stand about 2 feet from the side of it and look near it and picture it moving at you for about a whole foot. And moving that has details, like sounds, displacement of things, etc. I saw them all. OHH, but we're not done. Do you think the lady is ducking freaky enough now? Someone else ducking saw her. Here's how it went. I was at my aunt and uncle's apartment up the street. I forget which holiday or birthday we were celebrating. All I remember is the family was there and we were having a good time. I had slowed down a bit, and now we were in a circle telling spooky stories. I remember many, I might type them out some other time. It was my cousin's turn now. He says this happened in the same house I lived in before. They moved in after, then to the same LA suburb up the street. Anyway. He was upstairs in his room doing homework, same room as mine, and it was later at night. Around 11. His parents were in their room, same as my parents's. He remembered he had forgotten to fix up his backpack. Each day had a different set of classes, so you had to get the right shit each night, so he went downstairs to get one book he left behind. He went down the stairs, and as he got to the bottom, he saw to his right well, he described it as a kind of glowing but not really long, white thing that looked like a person. He was smart and ran upstairs. While he was telling this story, I was slowly sinking into the couch, into my own mental abyss. When he's done, I noticed my mom turned to look at me with this look on her face that said, "Holy shit, you were right," but in a scared way. I'll never forget that look. I have more stories, no excellent personal ones, just mild, non-eventful, but lots that I've heard from people I trust. Hit me up, but don't expect them very soon. I am glad to have this community to express. I have attempted to share a less detailed account of these events, only to find myself entangled in pointless arguments with hard-headed atheists. I don't blame them, I'm one of them, but I wasn't asking for that. There's no proof or anything around, nothing more than my memories. It's pointless. Believe it, or don't. I believe.